destabilizing activities taking place in Iran. As most of you know, we ended the Iran deal, which was one of the worst deals anyone could imagine, and that's had a major impact on Iran, and it's substantially weakened Iran, and we hope that at some point Iran will call us and we'll maybe make a new deal, or we maybe won't. But Iran is not the same country that it was 5 months ago, that I can tell you. They're no longer looking so much to the Mediterranean and the entire Middle East. They've got some big problems that they can solve probably much easier if they deal with us. So we'll see what happens. But we did discuss Iran. We discussed Israel and the security of Israel, and President Putin is very much involved now with us in a discussion with Bibi Netanyahu on working something out with surrounding Syria and specifically with regards to the security and long-term security of Israel. A major topic of discussion was North Korea and the need for it to remove its nuclear weapons. Russia has assured us of its support. President Putin said he agrees with me 100%, and they'll do whatever they have to do to try and make it happen. Discussions are ongoing, and they're going very, very well. We have no rush for speed. The sanctions are remaining. The hostages are back. There have been no tests. There have been no rockets going up for a period of 9 months. And I think the relationships are very good. So we'll see how that goes. We have no time limit. We have no speed limit. We're just going through the process. But the relationships are very good. President Putin is going to be involved in the sense that he is with us. He would like to see that happen. Perhaps the most important issue we discussed at our meeting prior to the press conference was the reduction of nuclear weapons throughout the world. The United States and Russia have 90%, as I said, and we can have a big impact. But nuclear weapons is, I think, the greatest threat of our world today. And they're a great nuclear power. We're a great nuclear power. We have to do something about nuclear. And so that was a matter that we discussed actually in great detail, and President Putin agrees with me. The matters we discussed are profound in their importance and have the potential to save millions of lives. I understand the many disagreements between our countries, but I also understand that dialogue and when you think about it, dialogue with Russia or dialogue with other countries, but dialogue with Russia in this case, where we've had such poor relationships for so many years, dialogue is a very important thing, and it's a very good thing. So if we get along with them, great. If we don't get along with them, then we won't get along with them. But I think we have a very good chance of having some very positive things. I thought that the meeting that I had with President Putin was really strong. I think that they were willing to do things that, frankly, I wasn't sure whether or not they would be willing to do. And we'll be having future meetings, and we'll see whether or not that comes to fruition. But we had a very, very good meeting. So I just wanted to clear up. I have the strongest respect for our intelligence agencies headed by my people. We have great people, whether it's Gina, or Dan Coates, or any of them. I mean, we have tremendous people, tremendous talent within the agencies. I think they're being guided properly, and we all want the same thing. We want success for our country. So with that, we're going to start a meeting now on tax reductions. We're going to be putting in a bill. Kevin Brady is with us, and I might ask Kevin just to say a couple of words about that, and then we'll get back onto a private meeting. But Kevin, could you maybe give just a brief discussion about what we'll be talking about?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Thank you for having members of the Ways and Means Committee here today. You know, peace through strength is foreign policy that works, and it works best when America has a strong economy and a strong military. Under your leadership, House and Senate Republicans are delivering on both of them. Today is about how we can strengthen America's economy even more, and we think the best place to start is with America's middle-class families and our small businesses. So today we're here to talk to you about making permanent this tax relief. One, so they can continue to grow. 2, so we can add 1.5 million new jobs. And 3, we can protect them against a future Washington trying to steal back those hard-earned dollars that you and Republican Congress has given them. So thank you very much for having us here today.
And the time of submittal, what would you think that would be, Kevin?
So we anticipate the House voting on this in September and the Senate setting a timetable as well.
Well, that's great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, everybody.
President Donald Trump saying he misspoke during his news conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and that he sees no reason why it wouldn't be Moscow that meddled in American democracy. Not that it would be them, it wouldn't be them. I'm Rick Leventhal in for Shepard Smith. President Trump with some damage control after catching backlash over his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. There he gave the former KGB spy a pass on meddling in our election and questioned the findings of America's intelligence agencies. That caused a lot of fallout on Capitol Hill, where a wave of Republican lawmakers, including some of the president's closest allies, slammed his remarks yesterday in Finland. House Speaker Paul Ryan setting the record straight on Russia earlier today.
But let's be very clear, just so everybody knows, Russia did meddle with our elections. Not only did Russia meddle in our elections, they're doing it around the world. They did it to France. They did it to Moldova. They're doing it to the Baltics. Russia is trying to undermine democracy itself, to delegitimize democracy.
We have Team Fox coverage. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is in Washington. But first, Kristen Fisher live at the White House. Kristen.
Hey, Rick. Well, there were really two big questions heading into this press availability with President Trump. The first, does he believe, does he accept his intelligence community's findings that Russia did meddle in the 2016 election? And does he believe Putin, or does he believe his intelligence community? Well, as he said, President Trump just said that he misspoke during that press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said that after we saw all the criticism come out from the media and from even Republican members of Congress, President Trump says he got out a transcript, read it over, and it was then that he realized that he simply misspoke. And I want to make sure I get this straight. He says that I said the word would instead of wouldn't. What he said was, I don't see why it would be Russia that meddled in the 2016 election. That's what he said during the press conference with Putin. That's what got so many people up in arms. And what he says he meant to see is that I don't see why it wouldn't be Russia. So that was President Trump. That's about as close to an apology, I think, as you're going to get from a president like President Trump, coming out saying that he misspoke there. The other big headline that was just made by President Trump is the fact that he came out and said that he fully supports the findings of his intelligence community. He says that he does accept that they believe that Russia did indeed meddle in the 2016 election. And he says he has the full faith and the full support in our intelligence community. He did not say that yesterday. So, we had so many of his supporters, people like the former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, coming out and saying that this was the biggest mistake of Mr. Trump's presidency. He said that he needed to come out and fix it, and he needed to do it fast. President Trump has now come out and attempted to fix it within, a day of this press conference taking place. Rick will now have to wait and see if this is enough to quell some of his critics.
And Kristen, just so our viewers know, it is pouring rain at the White House and here in New York City as well. That's what that noise is behind you. I thought it was interesting. The lights went out when he said he had full faith in our intelligence agency. But he also said that while there may have been meddling in the election by the Russians, it didn't affect the outcome, is what he had to say. President Trump also talked about that NATO summit and about building relationships and getting our NATO partners to pay more. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, he said that he had an even better meeting with Russia, but he said that he had a good meeting with our NATO allies. And he even went so far as to thank the NATO Secretary General. He's been taking a lot of criticism for being nice to Putin and too tough on our NATO allies. So he really did go out of his way to thank the NATO Secretary General. He also made sure to talk about what he was able to accomplish from that meeting with NATO. He says that he was able to help strengthen the NATO alliance by getting them to pay more, some $45 billion more, and help them to pay their bills on time. And then in terms of some of the other accomplishments that he was able to get out of that meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, President Trump just pointed to progress in the Middle East, specifically Iran, Israel, Syria, and North Korea. But the one thing he left out was any specifics, no hard deliverables from that one-on-one meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Rick.
And of course, much more on all this just ahead. Kristen Fisher live at the White House. Kristen, thanks very much. We're monitoring reaction from U.S. intelligence officials. Team Fox coverage continues with our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, who is also live in Washington. Catherine.
Well, thank you, Rick. The former top spy in the Obama administration, James Clapper, who's faced his own calls for resignation after statements he made to Congress about the data collection of U.S. citizens by the NSA, said he believes the current director of national intelligence, Dan Coats, should be considering his options.
What you have to balance is, am I doing more good by leaving and reinforcing a principle, or do I do more harm if I leave? And so I'm sure that Dan Coats, I'd be very surprised if he's not going through that calculus himself right now.
Former CIA Director John Brennan, a frequent critic of the president, is now joined by former CIA Director Michael Hayden, who told NPR, quote, "I was quite willing to comment on the press conference," a reference to Helsinki yesterday, something along the lines of, "Could have been a lot worse until we got to the end. It could not have been a lot worse," he said. For his part, DNI Coats issued a very forceful statement yesterday that the U.S. intelligence agencies have always been, quote, "clear in our assessments of Russian meddling in the 2016 election." There's been no further statement from DNI Coats today, but it's important to note that later this week, he is already scheduled to speak at the Aspen Security Forum in a panel discussion, and no doubt this will come up, Rick.
Catherine Herridge in Washington. Catherine, thank you. We will have much more just ahead on the president's 13-plus minutes of comments on what happened in Helsinki, what he said, what he meant to say, and we'll get reaction from another White House journalist coming up just ahead.
Are you a veteran and need money for your family? New Day USA can help. We earned a lot of VA benefits with our service, but the VA home loan benefit is a big one. By refinancing up to 100% of your home's value, you could take out an average of $54,000 cash. You could use that money to pay credit card debt and other expenses, plan for retirement, and get back on your feet financially.
Call 1-855-575-7943.
If you're a veteran, own a home, and need money for your family, call New Day USA to use your valuable VA home loan benefit.
Thank you, Admiral.
It lets you borrow up to 100% of your home's value.
Thank you, Admiral.
With today's rising home values, that can mean more money for you and your family.
Thank you, Admiral.
Money to pay down debts and get financial peace of mind.
Thank you, Admiral.
We'll do everything we possibly can to get you approved.
Call 1-855-575-7943.
Are you thinking about buying a stair lift? This essential free guide will answer all your questions. You can find out how a stair lift can improve your life in a few easy steps with this free guide packed full of detailed information. All of your questions answered. What should I think about when buying a stair lift? What type of stair lift will suit my home? What difference can a stair lift make to my life? Answers to these and many more with this free guide to buying a stair lift. A stair lift can be crucial to you staying independent in your own home. They were invented to make your life easier. And this free, practical guide, produced with the help of Acorn Stair Lifts, will make it easier for you to choose the one that's right for you. So call now, 1-800-908-1851 for your free copy of your guide to buying a stair lift and have all of your stair lift questions answered today. 1-800-908-1851.
Have you ever seen something so beautiful that all you could say was, wow? Beaches, Turks, and Caicos, where anything is possible because everything is included. Wow! Get up to 65% off. Call 1-800-BEACHES.
No matter who rides point, there are over 10,000 Allstate agents riding sweep. Call one today. Are you in good hands?
Just moments ago, President Trump says he misspoke during that news conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday. He says, in fact, that he does believe the intelligence agency's conclusion that Russia did meddle in the 2016 election, but he says it did not affect the outcome. Let's bring in Zeke Miller. He's a White House reporter for the Associated Press. Zeke, my first thought was, why did he wait this long to correct the record? What's your reaction?
Yeah, it's that same question. It was pretty much 27 hours or so from that press conference yesterday with Vladimir Putin to today. We've seen multiple tweets by the president, a number of interviews by the president. If he knew he misspoke or had seen the initial coverage, had read a newspaper, turned on TV, which we know he did because he responded to TV interviews, why did he not clear this up beforehand? He let the American people, the world really, think this is what he meant to say. If this is indeed, a true, real walk back. We've seen the president, this is a rare admission by the president of a mistake. In the past, we saw last year, almost this time last year, after the Charlottesville incident, he sort of made a very
very highly publicized walk back of his comments about both sides, and then a couple of days after that sort of walked back the walk back. Are we going to see that playbook play out here? Because again, here the president was reading pretty much very closely from a script. So how authentic is this walk back by the president, and will it last? That's one other thing we have to see.
The criticism was fast and furious. It came very, very quickly, momentarily after he spoke at that news conference. So is it fair to call this damage control? Was this some sort of orchestrated way of trying to save face?
That's certainly what it looks like, particularly when you put that time frame to it. The criticism, condemnation by members of his own party has been pretty much universal, with the exception of Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Even just moments before the president spoke and sort of made this walk back, we'd heard from Mitch McConnell issuing a sort of a very public reassurance to American allies overseas that we value NATO and European partners are friends, and Russia is a foe. Something the president really himself hasn't been willing to say. So it was coming from all corners for the president, really, and here he was actually bending to that reality.
And yet, in the past, the president has said that he agrees with the intelligence agency's conclusions. He has said that he understands that Russia meddled or may have meddled in the election in 2016. He has also said that he doesn't think that it affected the outcome and that there was, in fact, no collusion. But I want to play again for our viewers that moment when he said he misspoke during yesterday's news conference. Here it is.
I thought that I made myself very clear by having just reviewed the transcript. Now, I have to say, I came back and I said, what is going on? What's the big deal? So I got a transcript, I reviewed it. I actually went out and reviewed a clip of an answer that I gave. And I realized that there is a need for some clarification. It should have been obvious. I thought it would be obvious, but I would like to clarify just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't.
So I guess the big question now is, will this be enough for his Republican critics? Zeke?
It certainly takes some of that pressure off right now, but this is only one part of the controversy surrounding the president's trip. The president, even if you take this correction at face value, the president really didn't challenge Vladimir Putin directly, publicly about Russian meddling in 2016 or about ongoing efforts for 2018. He didn't publicly challenge him on things like Crimea, his efforts to back the Assad regime in Syria. And then also, if you go back earlier in the trip, his comments about American allies overseas at NATO and in the United Kingdom, all of those things taken together is what's drawn this criticism for the president. The president is certainly addressing the big shiny object, but if you would take the entire trip at face value, there's a lot there for the president's critics, but also his friends to find fault in.
Zeke, I'm told that the pool reporter shouted at the president as he finished his remarks, would he condemn Putin? And the president didn't respond to that shouted question. He did say, though, during that statement that he made, that it's important, as he said for quite some time now, it's important to have a good relationship with Russia, that it's better to be friends than enemies with Russia. Is that enough? And what's the feeling there on Capitol Hill with the president's comments now?
Well, it's probably not enough for the president's critics. Maybe nothing will ever be enough for the president's critics when it comes to this issue in particular. But it does fit into the broader pattern. The president presidents generally need a certain amount of leeway on the international stage to carry out agreements and have negotiations with actors, friend or foe, around a range of subjects. But the president just doesn't have a whole lot of goodwill there that he's earned.
Zeke Miller, White House reporter for the Associated Press. We appreciate your time. The president said clearly today Russians attempted to interfere in our elections in 2016. That's what the president said today. As you might imagine, Russians had a far different reaction to that Trump-Putin summit yesterday. The news from Moscow and the praise for Putin is coming up.
Psoriatic arthritis tries to get in my way? Watch me. I've tried lots of things for my joint pain. Now, watch me. Think I'd give up showing these guys how it's done? Please.
Real people with active psoriatic arthritis are changing the way they fight it. They're moving forward with Cosentyx. It's a different kind of targeted biologic. It's proven to help people find less joint pain and clearer skin. Don't use if you are allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting Cosentyx, you should be checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of an infection, or if you have received a vaccine or plan to. If you have inflammatory bowel disease, tell your doctor if symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions may occur.
With less joint pain, watch me.
For less joint pain and clearer skin, ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
The world's newest ocean cruise line is yet again a world's best. Viking's elegant ships deliver a superb, inclusive experience, with enriching shore excursions, alternative dining, all veranda staterooms, Wi-Fi, and much more. We're very proud to have been named a world's best 3 years in a row by Travel and Leisure readers. Learn more at vikingcruises.com.
The best part about being a bath fitter installer is the reveal. Homeowners greet us in the morning and love that we're going to install a beautiful new tub right over their old one without tearing the bathroom apart. But they're never quite prepared for what they get come the end of the day. We call it the wow moment. When they see their new bathtub that's high quality and more beautiful than they could have imagined, I can't help but smile. Since it's Bath Fitter, it's built to last a lifetime. We guarantee it. You too can have a bathroom you'll love. Call now or visit bathfitter.com. Every time you're online, your private information can be stolen, sold, or exploited. That's why you need NordVPN. Online protection trusted by millions of people worldwide. NordVPN uses military-grade encryption to protect your information from online tracking. In just a few clicks, you can protect up to 6 devices for just $4 per month. Don't risk being hacked. Install NordVPN at nordvpn.com/TV today.
Life is forgetting that extra screw. Moving your boxes into the pavement. A workout that doesn't quite work out. No matter what happens, the Thumbtack app can help. We'll find you local pros for the job. See their prices and reviews. Even chat with pros right in the app. Download the free app or go to thumbtack.com today.
President Trump's summit with Vladimir Putin getting a more positive reaction in Moscow than here in the United States. Kremlin officials are praising the Russian president's one-on-one meeting with Trump as a win for Putin. One headline on a state-run newspaper reads, "The West's attempts to isolate Russia failed." Putin told Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace that he thinks the summit with President Trump helped improve the relationship between the two world powers.
We are starting to achieve some understanding, which gives us sufficient ground to say that a lot of things, changed to the better during today's meeting.
For more reaction from Moscow, let's go to Benjamin Hall. Benjamin?
Yeah, hi, Rick. Well, of course, no great surprise that Russian media was very positive for President Putin. It is largely state-run over there, and criticism is very rare. But people on the streets had a different take. There was among them a recognition, a sense that this hadn't changed any of the major issues that would have affected their lives, anything that would have changed what can often be a very poor country.
I think nothing will really change. In situations like these, politicians try to hold their ground and do not want to lose in any way.
At least it will not get any worse, I think. Anyway, the very fact that they met in Helsinki and talked normally, I think it is a positive thing.
Some of the other press focused on the fact that this was an opening. It was perhaps an opportunity for real change. But throughout their coverage, there was this deep reminder of the distrust which is so often felt by Russians towards the US. So certainly, yes, very positive coverage in the Russian media. But the one thing that they didn't talk about, the one thing the Russians didn't get, that President Trump didn't put on the table, was sanctions relief. And that's the one thing that would have had a real impact for the Russians, the one thing that they were all looking for. Rick?
And Benjamin, what about the global impact of this summit?
Well, I think from early on you heard President Trump be quite upset with the fact that the media had focused on the Mueller investigation, on the hacking, the 2016 election interference, when actually they were discussing some very real global issues. Nuclear disarmament, the Syrian conflict, the Iran deal, a lot of issues which they said were bigger than the two of them. There was no concrete agreement, though, on those issues. President Trump did say during the conference that, during the summit, that they disagreed, the two sides on the Iran deal, but that on the Syrian issue that they were getting closer. But later on Fox News, Vladimir Putin denied any involvement in Syrian civilian deaths.
Victims are inevitable, and there'll always be a question who's to blame. I think it is the terrorist groups who are to blame, who destabilized this situation in the country. The ISIS, the Jabhat al-Nusra, and the like. Those are the true culprits.
So sort of a complete denial by President Putin of their involvement in in the Syrian war. And the two groups that we're waiting to hear from, really, NATO and also Ukraine, the two groups that really have to face off against Russia. We have not heard from either of them, and of course I know both sides were hoping to hear more from President Trump on their issues. And we had a bit of a clarification just now in the words he just said, but we are still waiting for more on that and the support that they have countering Russia.
Benjamin Hall, thank you very much. Fox News has confirmed Senate Republican leaders are considering a measure that would support the findings of U.S. intelligence officials that Russia did, in fact, interfere in the 2016 election. That could be another setback for President Trump after many lawmakers from his own party criticized him for not standing up to Russian President Vladimir Putin, who continues to deny the accusations. As we reported just moments ago, President Trump said he misspoke yesterday on election meddling, so perhaps he has already corrected the record. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill with more on this. Mike?
Well, hi, Rick. Yes, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is issuing a call for action following the Helsinki summit.
Our response to the debasement of American interests before a foreign adversary demands a response not just in word, but in deed. Our Republican colleagues cannot just talk the talk, and some of them have done that, most haven't. But our Republican colleagues as a body need to walk the walk.
Senate Republican Whip Senator John Cornyn of Texas basically said that lawmakers need to get serious in a hurry to prevent future election meddling.
We better wake up, and rather than the blame game and pointing fingers, we better get ready for the next election, the midterm election in 2018.
After all, we're less than 4 months from the next election, those midterm elections, and no concrete steps have been taken, Rick.
Mike, maybe it's too soon. Not sure if you've gotten any reaction yet from the president's clarification of his remarks yesterday there on Capitol Hill.
There has not been any immediate response so far to what the president's been saying. We know a lot of lawmakers have been talking about Congress trying to speak with one voice in terms of the issues going forward, trying to say that they do not approve of Moscow's behavior. There's been some buzz here on Capitol Hill about the possibility of more sanctions to get Congress to speak with one voice, saying Moscow's behavior is not appropriate. Senator John Tester, a Democrat of Montana, said he is all for more sanctions against Moscow, but he says he's not sure there's the political will to do it. House Speaker Paul Ryan told reporters he's open to the possibility of more financial pressure on the Kremlin.
We'd already put in place sanctions. If the Foreign Affairs Committee or the Financial Services Committee and the Senate Banking Committee think that there are other sanctions that we have not yet placed upon Russia, I'm more than happy to consider those.
Less than 4 months from the midterm elections, it's pretty hard to get Republicans and Democrats from the House and the Senate all heading in one direction. We will see if this time is different. Rick.
Don't hold your breath. Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Thank you. President Trump says last week's get-together with our NATO allies went really well. That's after he slammed some of our closest allies over trade and spending, and now the top Republican in the Senate is defending our friends in Europe while blasting Russia. That's coming up.
I have type 2 diabetes. Trying to manage my A1C. Then I learned type 2 diabetes puts me at greater risk for heart attack or stroke. Can one medicine help treat both blood sugar and cardiovascular risk? I asked my doctor. She told me about non-insulin Victoza. Victoza is not only proven to lower A1C and blood sugar, but for people with type 2 diabetes treating their cardiovascular disease, Victoza is also approved to lower the risk of major CV events, such as heart attack, stroke, or death. While not for weight loss, Victoza may help you lose some weight.
Victoza is not for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not take Victoza if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Victoza or any of its ingredients. Stop taking Victoza and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck or symptoms of a serious allergic reaction such as rash, swelling, difficulty breathing or swallowing. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis. So stop taking Victoza and call your doctor right away if you have severe pain in your stomach area. Tell your doctor your medical history. Gallbladder problems have happened in some people. Tell your doctor right away if you get symptoms. Taking Victoza with the sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar. Common side effects are nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, decreased appetite, indigestion, and constipation. Side effects can lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
Change the course of your treatment. Ask your doctor about Victoza.
With TripAdvisor, finding your perfect hotel at the lowest price is as easy as dates, deals, done. Simply enter your destination and dates and see all the hotels for your stay. TripAdvisor searches over 200 booking sites to show you the lowest prices so you can get the best deal on the right hotel for you. Dates, deals, done. TripAdvisor. Visit tripadvisor.com.
I'm Leah Gabriel with the Fox Report now. Police in Houston say they arrested a suspected serial killer possibly connected to the deaths of 3 people. They say someone called in a tip after noticing the man's car. Cops tried to stop him, but he sped away and led them on a chase, eventually pulling over. Officers say there are signs he was involved in 3 killings in the past week, in addition to other crimes. Meantime, rescuers in California saving a man from a rock in the middle of a raging river. The sheriff in Kern County, just north of Los Angeles, says the man's girlfriend called to say the water had swept him away. He was not wearing a life vest. The guy sat on the rock for a couple of hours before a helicopter lifted him to safety. And a driver in Canada came pretty close to a car that was spinning out of control on a rain-covered highway. This video from her dash cam, the other car fishtailed and ended up facing her. Everyone is okay. The news continues with Rick Leventhal right after this.
Dear foremothers, your society was led by a woman who governed thousands, commanded armies, yielded to no one. When I found you in my DNA, I learned where my strength comes from. My name is Courtney McKinney, and this is my Ancestry DNA story.
Now, with 2 times more geographic detail than other DNA tests, order your kit at AncestryDNA.com.
Her salon was booked for weeks until her laptop crashed this morning. Having IT problems? Ask a business advisor how to get on-demand tech support for as little as $15 a month. Right now, buy 1 HPA can get a second at 30% off at Office Depot, Office Max.
I'm Chris, and I lost 120 pounds on Nutrisystem.
Listen up, guys. Want to shed a few pounds? Got a beer belly? Can't fit into your pants? Then you need Nutrisystem for men. Lose up to 18 pounds and 8 inches overall in your first month. Money back guarantee.
I'm Essex, and I lost 43 pounds on Nutrisystem.
Real guys, real results. Put down the pie. Pick up the phone and get with the program today. Order your 28-day plan now and save 40% off every program. That's 40% off breakfast, lunches, dinners, and snacks for a limited time. Save
save 40%. Plus, get 1 week of all new NutriPro shakes, packed with 20 grams of protein to help shrink your gut, free.
The food was delicious. This is perfect for men, especially guys who don't want to cook.
We'll even throw in FedEx shipping, free. So get off the couch. Lose up to 18 pounds and 8 inches overall in your first month.
It's not that hard. You eat the food, you lose the weight.
Go online or call 855-915-EASY and get free shakes plus 40% off every program.
If wings are your thing, swing into Golden Corral's Wing Fest. Every night for all you can eat wings, just like you like them. Get them sweet, spicy, and smoked. Golden Corral, your choice rules.
President Trump saying moments ago that he had a successful meeting with our NATO allies and saying everybody was thrilled. While in Brussels last week, the president had harsh words for our allies. He accused them of not paying their fair share, and he said Russia was holding Germany captive over oil and gas. President Trump also slammed the way British Prime Minister Theresa May handled Brexit before saying he never criticized her. And President Trump warned Europe about the dangers of immigration. All that before his meeting with the Russian president. And just about an hour ago, the top Republican in the Senate had this to say.
Let me just say to our European friends, we value the NATO treaty. It's been the most significant military alliance in world history. We believe the European Union countries are our friends, and the Russians are not.
Let's bring in John Bussey, a Fox News contributor and associate editor at our corporate cousin, the Wall Street Journal. He's currently working in Spain, a NATO member, and he joins us from the Spanish capital, Madrid. John, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
Let's start with NATO. How is Spain reacting to the president's words and to that meeting last week?
Well, I think that they're taking all of this in context. I mean, they're looking at the president now trying to, change what he said yesterday. The context they're thinking of is what happened before that meeting, and you just outlined it. It was kind of one criticism of a NATO ally and a European ally after another, even calling the EU a foe, a trading foe. And then once he was at the meeting, language like, calling out the U.S., saying that many years of U.S. foolishness and stupidity have resulted in this bad relationship with Russia. So I think that the Europeans are looking at this and kind of wondering what to make of their previous trust in the United States. Can they trust the new president? One Spanish newspaper today ran the headline, "Trump folds to Putin after humiliating Europe." I think they're quite concerned, Rick, also what happened in that meeting. It was a one-on-one meeting. There were no note-takers, no witnesses other than the translators. Usually there's many aides in the room. What did they really talk about? Was there information divulged to Putin that affected European security? They found the whole thing mysterious and concerning.
So, safe to say that not everyone is thrilled, as the president suggests, overseas regarding the NATO situation.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, look, the president probably had a good argument going into this, saying that NATO allies need to be stronger. They need to have higher military spending so that if something does happen, NATO as a whole can come to its own defense along with the United States, not count on U.S. military to solve the problem. That's a compelling argument. It's the manner in which it was done. It was also in concert with a lot of other criticism of European allies, that they just felt alienated from the president. And then they watched this relationship with Putin. Putin, his folks invaded Ukraine, have supported violence there, took back Crimea. These are all things that NATO has a very sharp stand on, and the Europeans wanted to see that affirmed in front of Putin by the U.S. president. They really didn't get that.
John, the president just went on the record saying he misspoke yesterday during that news conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin, that, in fact, he does believe that the Russians meddled in that 2016 election, but it didn't affect the outcome. Your reaction to the president's comments and his attempt to walk it back?
Well, I think it's probably, using some of the language that you've heard on your broadcast already, walk it back for one, and do some damage control. This is a president who says what's on his mind, and we have to assume he meant that when he said it in Russia. he got a very bad, strong reaction. He's now kind of reacting to the reaction. It's a president also who's gone out of his way to mollify Putin and to kind of cozy up to that relationship. It's always been very concerning to the GOP, to a lot of others who see Putin very much as as a foe of America, not having just meddled in the U.S. election, but being at odds with the U.S. in a lot of other parts of the world, including Syria and North Korea. I think that this is a president who kind of wants it both ways. The question is why? Why is he so interested in having this cozier relationship with Putin? Is he so averse to criticizing him on the world stage when he has the world listening to a press conference like we heard yesterday?
Well, and I guess the other question, John, is did the president go far enough today? Did he condemn Putin as much as he should have? Should he be condemning Putin far more than he is?
Yeah, I don't think that you heard that, did you, in those remarks? You heard an affirmation of the intelligence communities, as he puts it, my people. The intelligence community as it exists now is still kind of in the context of criticizing previous leaders of the intelligence community and the military intelligence, which has kind of found the same thing. They're all in concert on this, that Russia has meddled. It's all these other things. It's holding Russia to
Trump's behavior today without actually mentioning his successor by name. President Obama was speaking in South Africa to mark 100 years since the late Nelson Mandela was born. It's the highest profile speech President Obama has given since leaving office. The former president talked about what's going on in the world now. He said we are living in, quote, strange and uncertain times.
It seemed unimaginable just a few years ago. I am not being alarmist, I am simply stating the facts. Look around. Strongman politics are ascendant, suddenly, whereby elections and some pretense of democracy are maintained, the form of it, but those in power seek to undermine every institution or norm that gives democracy meaning.
President Obama also said the world stands at a crossroads where freedoms and progress are threatened by the rise of nationalism. The former president also said there has been an utter loss of shame among political leaders. He said they simply double down when caught in lies and that they often make stuff up. In closing, the former president said the world has been through darker times. He quoted the former South African leader who spent nearly 3 decades behind bars for fighting state-sanctioned segregation.
Madiba reminds us that no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love.
The president saying love comes more naturally to the human heart and that we should see that as our North Star. There's a push among some House Republicans to get rid of the man overseeing the Russia investigation. Word of impeachment for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. We'll head to Capitol Hill for the latest on that next.
Why do experts believe silver could rise to $100 an ounce? Because according to a recent Forbes report, global demand for solar energy is going through the roof. China is leading the way with plans to build 100 of these massive solar farms. China's rising silver demand alone could equal nearly half of silver's annual production. California is next, requiring new homes to have solar power by 2020. The whole world is going solar, and without silver, there would be no solar. That's why experts are now making the case for silver at $100 an ounce. If you'd like to learn more, call Lear Capital for this free report, Sky High Silver. See why rising demand for solar in China, California, and around the world could soon drive silver prices to $100 an ounce. Get the free report and see for yourself why silver could be your best investment this year. Call 1-800-885-5100. 1-800-885-5100.
Imagine if you knew in advance when a stock's price is about to move. While working at one of Wall Street's biggest firms, I figured it out. The secret is to follow the dark pools, private stock exchanges where the big guys on Wall Street trade millions of shares before they're publicly reported and move the stock's price.
Year after year, Stephanie has consistently called out trades producing returns 3 times higher than the market's averages.
Think about how seeing these huge trades before they move the market can improve your trading. My new book and DVD reveal the secrets of how to see dark pool trades and capitalize on them. And today, I want to give you both of them for free. Just cover the shipping.
Get your free book and DVD now. Call 1-800-396-3737 or go to darkpoolsecrets.com. Supplies are limited, so call or go to darkpoolsecrets.com now. That's darkpoolsecrets.com.
Looking for vacation rentals? Search Home to Go Florida from $49. Home to Go Texas from $45. Home to Go New York from $59. Home to Go, the world's largest vacation rental search engine.
Home to go.
Get a free mesothelioma book from mesobook.com. People who have been diagnosed with mesothelioma have many questions. That's why we offer this free book.
Call toll-free at 1-800-745-BOOK. Your insurance rates skyrocket after a scratch so small you could fix it with a pen. How about using that pen to sign up for new insurance instead?
For drivers with accident forgiveness, Liberty Mutual won't raise their rates because of their first accident. Switch and you could save $782 on home and auto insurance. Call 1-888-764-2147 for a free quote today. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
We're now hearing from the attorney for a Russian woman charged with acting as an agent for the Kremlin. The suspect's name is Maria Butina. She's 29 years old and lives in Washington, D.C. At about this time yesterday, we got word the Justice Department had accused her of working at the request of a senior Russian government official. The feds say she gathered intelligence on U.S. officials and tried to set up back-channel communications between American politicians and Moscow. They say she was a gun rights activist and that she tried to build ties with the National Rifle Association as well as other conservative groups. Her lawyer says the whole thing is, quote, overblown, and that Maria Butina is not an agent of the Russian Federation. She is a Russian national in the United States on a student visa who recently graduated from American University. As President Trump continues to attack the Russia investigation, a couple of Republican lawmakers are leading the effort to dump the man who oversees it, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein appointed Special Counsel Robert Mueller to investigate Russian meddling in the 2016 election and possible collusion with the Trump campaign. But now, Republican Congressman Mark Meadows of North Carolina and Jim Jordan of Ohio are trying to build support for impeachment. Some members of Congress apparently want to vote by the end of this month. Those sources tell Fox News that any sort of resolution is days away at best. Let's bring in senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram. Chad, why are they trying to impeach this guy?
Well, they're concerned about harassment and how they threatened, allegedly, House staffers. They've been trying to get these documents from the Department of Justice and FBI for a long, long time. Here's the problem. I spoke with one senior Republican source, and they said if they go ahead and impeach the Deputy Attorney General, then providing those documents, that will stop. That will freeze everything. They are trying behind the scenes to stave this off. I'm told that there could be 2 resolutions, one that's live, one which would actually command a vote, and one which would come before, which would not be live, kind of a glorified press release. Here's the challenge for the House Republican leadership. Would they move to table or try to set this aside? In other words, not take an actual vote on impeaching Rosenstein and kind of send this off to the side. When the Democrats, the minority party, do have resolutions of this nature, usually it's Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader, that comes up and moves to table, and the vote is actually on the vote to set it aside or to table. Consider, Rick, how rare impeachment is. There have only been 62 impeachment proceedings in the history of the Republic. They haven't impeached anyone up here since Thomas Porteous, who was a federal judge from Louisiana in 2010. And there's only been one federal official, cabinet level, who wasn't a judge or a president of the United States, who's been impeached. And that was William Belknap, who was the Secretary of War in 1876. Now, I asked the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell earlier if they got an impeachment resolution over from the House of Representatives. Consider this as kind of like an indictment. The House would indict would impeach someone, and then it would move to the Senate for a trial. And Mitch McConnell said, quote, it would be far-fetched, and he really didn't think it would deserve any more comment beyond that, Rick.
So it sounds like there's never been a Deputy Attorney General impeached, or have they ever even attempted to impeach a Deputy Attorney General?
No, not really. I mean, we've just had that Secretary of War, William Belknap, back in the 1870s. And keep in mind that Alcee Hastings, congressman from Florida, he was in fact impeached back in the late 1980s.
And Chad, quickly, if you could, reaction to the president's turnaround today when he said that he misspoke during that news conference with President Putin in Russia, in Helsinki?
Right, absolutely. Chuck Schumer got word of this while he was speaking at his weekly press conference over in the Senate, and he said it was 24 hours too late. He said that it was the wrong place. This should have been made clear earlier, and we've just gotten word here in just the past couple of minutes that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will appear before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in an open hearing next Wednesday.
Fascinating times on Capitol Hill. Chad Pergram, you're there to see it all. We appreciate your time, sir. Minutes away, a sightseeing tour in Hawaii turns into a nightmare. That was a lava bomb shooting into a boat, sending people to the hospital. I'll talk to the man who got this on camera and survived. That's coming up right after the show. Also, we'll be streaming live and only on Facebook Watch, so get your internets ready and head to Facebook.
Know what? No, what? I just switched to Geico and got more.
More?
Got a company I can trust.
That's a heck of a lot more.
Over 75 years of great savings and service.
You can't argue with more.
Why would you?
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more. Crab Fest is back at Red Lobster. Discover our largest variety of crab and crab dishes all year, like new Crab Fest Combo. Your one chance to have new jumbo snow crab with tender Dungeness crab. Or try Crab Lover's Dream, sweet, juicy king crab and jumbo snow crab cozied up with crab linguine Alfredo. Even our shrimp is crab-topped, so hurry in and get your butter Dunkin' game on, because Crab Fest will be gone in a snap. And now bring home the seafood you crave with Red Lobster to go. Call or order online today.
Tonight, it's so bad and we have to do something about it.
Tucker gets new must-see insight from the president, only on Fox News Channel.
In the connected world we live in, our personal information is everywhere. What happens if that information gets in the hands of criminals?
Someone benefited from this. We were the ones on the hook for it. We can't pay a $50,000 bill.
Cyber criminals around the world keep finding new ways to steal your personal information, and it could be right from your personal computer or smartphone. That's why LifeLock now includes the power of Norton for even more protection for your identity and your devices, where so much of your personal information lives.
Knowing that Norton and LifeLock are on my side makes me feel even more confident about the protection that I have for my identity.
Monitoring your credit isn't enough to see if your identity is being used by thieves. LifeLock helps you see more threats like your information on the dark web. And now, with the power of Norton, we help defend your personal information on your devices from ransomware, spyware, and more. And if you have an identity theft problem, a U.S.-based restoration agent will work to fix it.
There's a whole team of people that are working on my behalf.
Only LifeLock members are covered by LifeLock's powerful $1 million protection package, including reimbursement of stolen funds and personal expenses up to the limits of your plan, and lawyers and experts if that's what it takes.
I was covered through my membership, and I received a check for approximately $1,200.
Join for as low as $9.99 per month and get 30 days free with promo code JOINTODAY. All memberships include identity threat detection and alerts, agents working to fix issues, LifeLock's $1 million protection package, and award-winning Norton security protection for up to 5 devices.
I've got 2 industry leaders to help protect my identity and my devices.
New LifeLock with Norton. Call 1-800-358-8319 or visit joinlifelock.com. Use promo code JOINTODAY to get your 30 days free and a free shredder with annual membership. Call right now.
The company that owns the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas is now suing the victims of the mass shooting that took place there last October. It's to stop them from suing the company. Court documents show MGM Resorts filed federal lawsuits against more than 1,000 people. Investigators say the gunman fired at the large crowd from a suite at the hotel happened during a music festival. 58 people died, and hundreds of others were hurt. Rounds of gunfire and a high-speed police chase caught on dash cam. Watch this. That officer shooting straight through his windshield as he speeds after a couple of murder suspects. Happened last week in Las Vegas. Police say the suspects fled a traffic stop and then the chase escalated. Wow. Police say one of the suspects tried to run into a suit. It was locked. They arrested that guy, but officers say they shot and killed the other suspect after he tried to approach them. The assistant police sheriff there said this video paints a picture of the dangers these officers dealt with that day. I'm Rick Leventhal in for Shepard Smith today. We appreciate your being here and watching the President speak live or on tape delay earlier this hour, correcting his comments with Russian President Vladimir Putin from Helsinki yesterday. You can see more of that online at foxnews.com, and you can also catch us on Facebook Watch. If you go to Facebook, and if you can't find it, just Google Facebook Watch. I'm told you can find it that way. There's the promo for it. Your World with Neil Kavut is next.
Sometimes bipolar I disorder can make you feel unstoppable. But mania, such as unusual changes in your mood, activity, or energy levels, can leave you on shaky ground. Help take control by talking to your doctor. Ask about Vraylar. Vraylar is approved for the acute treatment of manic or mixed episodes of bipolar I disorder in adults. Clinical studies showed that Vraylar reduced overall manic symptoms. Vraylar should not be used in elderly patients with dementia due to increased risk of death or stroke. Call your doctor about fever, stiff muscles, or confusion, which may mean a life-threatening reaction, or uncontrollable muscle movements, which may be permanent. Side effects may not appear for several weeks. High cholesterol and weight gain, high blood sugar, which can lead to coma or death, decreased white blood cells, which can be fatal, dizziness upon standing, falls, seizures, impaired judgment, heat sensitivity, and trouble swallowing may occur. You're more than just your bipolar I. Ask about Vraylar.
Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom, the nation's largest senior living referral service. For the past 5 years, I've spoken with hundreds of families and visited senior care communities around the country. And I've got to tell you, today's senior living communities are better than ever. These days, there are amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And nobody understands your options like the advisors at A Place for Mom. These are local expert advisors that will partner with you to find the perfect place and determine the right level of care, whether that's just a helping hand or full-time memory care. Best of all, it's a free service. There is never any cost to you. Senior living has never been better, and there's never been an easier way to get great advice. Call today. A Place for Mom. You know your family. We know senior living. Together, we'll make the right choice.
You rely on TripAdvisor so you don't miss out on the perfect hotel. But did you know you can also use TripAdvisor so you don't miss out on the best price? TripAdvisor searches over 200 booking sites to find the hotel you want for the lowest price, saving you up to 30%. So you can spend less time missing out and more time paddling out. Visit TripAdvisor.com or download the app.
No matter who rides point, there are over 10,000 Allstate agents riding sweet. And just like Tyrone Taylor, they know what it takes to help keep you protected. Are you in good hands?
Wow, that didn't take long. I think in golf they call this a mulligan.
And a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia. So just to repeat it, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. And the sentence should have been, and I thought I would be maybe a little bit unclear on the transcript or unclear on the actual video. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia.
All right, now this is the bad shot he wanted to forget. Remember this?
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
All right, so that was then all clarified now. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavino, and this is your world, but not so fast. The president isn't getting off the hook the way maybe some in the White House thought he would. To Kristen Fisher at the White House with the very latest on this 180. What do we make of this, Kristen?
Well, I'll tell you what, Neil, this was supposed to be just a meeting with Republican lawmakers about tax reform 2.0, but now all anybody is talking about is what President Trump just said about what went down in Helsinki. And, this really was just a stunning admission and a very rare reversal from a president who often doesn't make these kind of admissions or make these kinds of reversals. First, the admission, which you had just pointed out, President Trump said today that he simply misspoke, that he meant to say the words would not when instead he said would. And, he said that he figured it out by simply reading a transcript. He went through it, realized he made an error, and decided to come out today and correct himself. As for the reversal, and this is probably the one that's generating the most headlines and the one that had the most impact for the United States and its relations around the world, President Trump really did make a reversal. Yesterday he was asked, who do you believe most? Do you believe the U.S. intelligence community when they say that Russia meddled in the 2016 election, or do you believe Russian President Vladimir Putin? And yesterday President Trump essentially kind of said that he believed both, but today President Trump did a 180. Listen.
I'll begin by stating that I have full faith and support for America's great intelligence agencies, always had. And I have felt very strongly that while Russia's actions had no impact at all on the outcome of the election, let me be totally clear in saying that, and I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election.
So, Neil, bottom line, this should go a long way to satisfy or at least quell some of the president's critics, but the fact that he chose not to say that while standing next to Russian President Vladimir Putin on foreign soil, that is not going to go away anytime soon. Neil?
Kristen, do we know if Vladimir Putin has had any response to this yet?
Well, we know the Russian Foreign Secretary, Sergei Lavrov, had said that this was, the summit was wonderful, fabulous. He had lots of very positive things to say about it, but so far, Neil, I have not heard anything in terms of a response to those comments that President Trump just made about an hour ago.
All right, Kristen, thank you. Great reporting as always. So how is all of this playing out? Let's go to Gabby Margello, the Washington Examiner. Gabby, what do you think?
Look, I think that this really has a lot of staying power. This is a controversy that's going to continue despite the president's do-over today. Because if you looked at the remarks that he made at the White House during this meeting with congressional Republicans, he did say that he meant in that press conference yesterday that he didn't see any reason why Russia wouldn't have meddled in the 2016 presidential election, and said that he has full faith in the intelligence community. But at the same time, he said, the intel community concluded that it was Russia, but it could have been some others. There were plenty of bad actors out there who would like to meddle in U.S. affairs. And so I think that really lends itself to the question that, whether or not President Trump does in fact believe the intelligence community, which is something that has been raised in the last 24 hours based on those initial comments that he made. And that's something that's going to be continued to play out in the press over the next 24 or 48, maybe even for the rest of the week.
Dan Coates, his intelligence director, was talking about this, that he supported the data the Russians were involved in trying to screw up the election. Not that it altered the outcome, and most people who have looked at this issue kind of confirmed that. The Russians were definitely involved, but they didn't change the outcome. But he did quote, Dan Coates, he did quote those findings. He just said that he, at the time, this is just yesterday, kind of accepted the position of Vladimir Putin. Now, Vladimir Putin is always going to say that this never happened, it's much ado about nothing, or get your investigators in the United States over here to talk to these people who presumably were indicted, and we want the same to go over there. That's going nowhere. But where does this put this relationship right now?
I mean, I think we need to wait and see how the Russians react, whether they do issue a statement regarding what President Trump just said about an hour ago. I think it's unlikely that we're going to hear from them at this point, that this will sort of play out behind the scenes. But, you know, it is important that this, what you just mentioned, the fact that President Trump yesterday praised Vladimir Putin for offering to let Bob Mueller and his team of investigators go to Russia and question these individuals who were just indicted last Friday. You know, even though the controversy over Russian meddling in the 2016 election may be over, or at least the White House thinks that this damage control and this statement that was issued earlier today has made that go away, there is still the issue of, you know, what President Trump wants to accomplish when it comes to improving ties with the U.S. and Russia, and whether there is any actual intent by his administration to try and negotiate a deal where there would be some shared intelligence or investigators working with Mueller's team and Mueller's team working with the Kremlin. I mean, obviously that is unlikely, but the fact that the president even entertained that is certainly controversial in and of itself.
Yeah, he thought it was a novel idea. Others immediately said, well, it's a going nowhere idea, but be that as it may, done now. Gabby, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, the read from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Maryland Democratic Senator Ben Cardin. Senator, very good to have you.
Bill, good to be with you. Thank you.
What do you make of this?
Well, on the world stage yesterday, Mr. Putin heard exactly what he wanted to hear. And when you give Russia an opening, you give Mr. Putin an opening, he'll move on it. We saw that 10 years ago when they moved into Georgia, blocking Georgia's entry into NATO. We saw that when Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine. He interfered in our elections and believes now that he can continue to do those types of activities, and the American president's not going to take action. So I think the damage has been done to America's national security and leadership by that summit. We don't know what happened in the meeting, in the room, one-on-one, but it's clear from the news conference that Mr. Putin was happy with the meeting.
All right, does this change anything, though? If the president acknowledged that he might have misstated himself, others are saying he just pulled a 180 here, but does it change anything, Senator?
I don't think so. When you take a look at the totality of what the president has said, including what he said in Helsinki, he's siding with Mr. Putin. He's basically saying the relationship between these two countries is so important. He's not treating Russia under Mr. Putin as an adversary, and that's wrong, because we know that Mr. Putin will continue to act against our national security interests unless we're prepared to stand up to him. And the president certainly did not show that strength at the summit meeting in Helsinki.
Well, some have wondered what else could be going on here. Nancy Pelosi, I don't know whether you're in agreement with her on this. She said his total weakness, referring to the president, Senator, in the presence of Putin proves that the Russians had something on the president, personally, financially, or politically. Do you believe that?
Well, I can tell you, I listened to Mr. Putin's response to a reporter's question as to whether there was anything on President Trump. And when you listen to Mr. Putin's response, it doesn't give you any comfort level. I don't know. I mean, you're dealing with a KGB operative, former operative. They use tactics that are extraordinary. And that's why we were concerned on the one-on-one meeting in Helsinki. And we just don't know. What we do know is that the Mueller investigation...
But would you still have advised the one-on-one meeting?
No, I would not have. I think after the indictments, unless it was set up clearly to deal with resolving Russia's engagement here in the United States so that it was very clear not only to Mr. Putin, but to the international community that the president was meeting in order to file the grievances and to get change of behavior. If that was clear, that's one thing, but that's not how this meeting was set up.
We don't know what was done behind the scenes, though, to be fair, right?
We don't, but we know what the news conference was about.
And even with that one change in statement, that news conference was very much pandering to Mr. Putin.
Do you worry, though, Senator, that a lot of people are going to look at the Obama administration's deal with going ahead and normalizing relations with Cuba? Some people said, well, that was long overdue. We don't know what, greased the skids for that, but it is what it is. Relations are normalized, all of that. That there are sometimes and some conditions where you meet with someone you don't flip over to advance a goal. In this case, with the president wanting to get past this, deal with some other thorny issues, try to remind the Russians not to do this again, if that's the case. Again, take him at his word, sir. What do you make of that?
Well, I agree with that strategy. You want to meet and talk and set up means in which trying to resolve issues. But you have to acknowledge what Russia has done in recent years is so much against U.S. interests that you got to make that clear. You got to make it clear that the attack on our country in 2016 is unacceptable. Their invasion of Ukraine is unacceptable. We'll never recognize Crimea's annexation by Russia. What they're doing in Syria and supporting the Assad regime and war crimes, that needs to be the framework for such a meeting. And if you go into the meeting saying, all I'm trying to do is improve a relationship that's been terrible over a long period of time, you give the clear indication that it's going to be acceptable what Mr. Putin has done.
Senator Corden, thank you very much for taking the time, sir. Appreciate it. I believe Marco Rubio is speaking right now in Washington on these developments. Let's listen in.
About it extensively. Our number one objective is to get it passed in the Senate first. And just today alone, I've just had a flood of members across the aisle, across the Senate on both sides of the aisle, offer to be involved. The majority leader has said that he wants to bring it to the floor if we can figure out a way to get it there without burning 5 days of debate, given all the other issues that are going on. So I feel positive about it. We have some work to do.
Why do you think there's a flood of interest in your bill?
Well, I just think I think people recognize sort of, the need, it's been in the press. There's been a lot of talk about what happened yesterday in the press. And so it serves as a catalyst to sort of take action now about the future. We can all, people are going to continue to argue about all these other things regarding 2016. But we can all agree that we don't want to see this happen again. And so hopefully we can, build a strong majority, which I think we already have, to get this thing passed and into law.
Is the message that Congress doesn't believe that the president would impose these punishments on Russia, so you need to do it instead?
No, I think it's irrespective of who's president. One of the things that, what happens is when these interference things go on, by the time you sort of figure out whether it happened and then go through the congressional process of imposing sanctions, it takes a while. In this particular case, it's in place ahead of time. So it is Putin would very clearly understand up front, this is what's going to happen if you do this again, and he can factor that into his cost-benefit analysis.
But you're not just saying it's coincidence that suddenly everyone's interested in your bill after yesterday.
I'm sure that what happened yesterday and the reaction to it has been a key part of that drive, but we filed it months ago. We're just glad people are jumping on board.
Do you think that momentum is going to decline now that the president has walked back his comments?
I don't expect it will. Most of the people that came up to me came up to me after the fact. Suffice it to say that I think yesterday outlined sort of the ongoing threat that this is going to happen again. And so if that has generated enough interest to get people on board, I'm sorry it took that, but I'm glad that it's happening.
Do you think that the president's correction fully undoes the damage that many people here and abroad think that he did in Helsinki?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. Time will tell. All right, gotta go back to work.
Thank you. All right, that was Marco Rubio, I believe, referring to a measure he had, and this has been on the table for a while right now, to punish Russia through sanctions and other means for meddling in our election, and a lot of Republican support was there for that. Again, there was a fear of taking on the president who thought that this might go a step too far. We don't know the president's views on this right now, but acknowledging earlier today that the Russians were indeed involved in trying to screw up the 2016 election. Not that it altered the outcome, but the president indicated simply when it appeared that he took Vladimir Putin's side on this, that they had nothing to do with that he was accepting Putin's view on this at face value. Was simply not the case. He just misspoke. That's a moot point to my next guest right now. Chris Kagan is a former Belmont County, Ohio GP chairman, resigning his post as the chairman of the Republican Party there over this very issue. Sir, very good to have you. Did anything the president say earlier today, just about an hour ago, change your mind?
Not changed my mind, Neil, and thank you for having me. I was very happy to hear him say they were taking strong actions to safeguard the midterm elections, but unfortunately, with the president trying to alter the meaning of the language that we all saw him use in Helsinki, I'm afraid it's not as credible as those in the White House would hope. I take no joy or pleasure in saying that, but I just don't think that's going to alleviate the problems.
So, do you think the president misspoke as he stated that that was not his intention, or do you think that that was his intention and he was surprised by the blowback he got?
I'm not surprised by the blowback. I think that was entirely appropriate. I think this is classic damage control. I'm a lawyer by profession, so let's just say I don't think the credibility of this witness would hold up.
All right, so here you've stepped down in light of this, and now some of your Republican colleagues might say, whoa, you know, you're adding needless drama to this. You say what?
Well, and I understand that, and I respect that, but, you know, I needed my president yesterday, 6 feet from Vladimir Putin, to basically stick his finger in his chest and say, we know what you did, it will not happen again on my watch, and if it does, there will be, you know, maximum pressure applied to Russia. And what I saw was more akin to, in effect, a hostage situation. And it was a bridge too far. As a matter of conscience, that I'm in a political position. I am a county chairman. And at the end of the day, that's all I am. I'm not a member of Congress. But I have to be, and I should be, in lockstep with the president's agenda and vision. And after that performance, it was clear that not siding with the American intel community, taking President Putin's word for it, was just a bridge too far for me. But I'm not leaving the party. I'm still a very proud conservative, but that was clearly a direction that I could not support.
Now, the president's fairly popular in your neck of the woods, is he not?
Oh, absolutely. In fact,
so you might have done great harm to yourself politically, right?
No question. No question. But
have people told you that? Have people who support the president told you good riddance?
It's starting to come in. No question about that. And President Trump, to give you an example of how popular he is, we hadn't had a Republican county commissioner elected in 40 years until 2016, and now we have two. So I give the president full marks for bringing those along. But, you know, at the same time, each individual, I believe, has to address their own conscience and their values, and those statements were something that I just could not continue to support.
Did you hear from anyone at the White House?
No, I'm not nearly that important, I'm afraid. In fact, I'm quite shocked, quite honestly, that it's taken the life that it has and given me the opportunity to speak.
I am almost betting someone tweets from the White House on this development, but I could be wrong. But what do you do now? I mean, the president is. Let me just get this straight here, because the president is going to say he hopes to have corrected this by clarifying his position today, whether it was a reversal or he was pressured to. He has changed his mind, or whatever, or clarified his mind for the American people and the world. Are you satisfied with just that?
No, Neil, you know, you're a businessman. You know that in the moment, you know, you can't recapture the gravitas that the President of the United States had available to him yesterday. To make that clarification in the cabinet room in the White House without President Putin being there to hear it, to see it in his eyes, to see the conviction in his statement, I just don't see this as anything other than sort of what has to be put out from a political standpoint. But it's going to take a good while, I believe, to rebuild the president's credibility with President Putin.
All right, Hagan, thank you very, very much. We'll see what happens. Chris Hagan, former Belmont County, Ohio DOD chairman. We're going to have to read on all this from the senator of that fine state, Rob Portman, what he makes of what Mr. Hagan just had to say, and what the president just had to say. More to this.
Using Ebates, I've earned $756.28. You get money. For shopping. There's nothing better than that. And more importantly, it doesn't cost you a cent.
Join free today and get a $10 gift card at ebates.com. I promise to have and to hold from this day forward till death do us part.
SelectQuote can help you keep your promise with life insurance starting at under $1 a day.
But you promised, Dad.
Come on,
SelectQuote helped Jim, 41, keep his promise by finding him a $500,000 policy for under $26 per month. And found Kathy, 37, a $750,000 policy for just $22 per month. Since 1985, we've helped millions of families by finding them affordable coverage by impartially shopping highly rated insurers offering over 70 policies.
Dad, you're coming, right? You promise? You promise? You promise?
I promise. Keep your promise. Call SelectQuote at 800-304-3359 or visit SelectQuote.com for life insurance coverage starting at under $1 a day. We shop, you save.
Hi, I'm Lisa. Definitely would like to meet someone special. Looking for a real relationship? So I definitely would like to find a long-term relationship. Somebody who is smart, who has an excellent sense of humor. Can't wait to meet you. Bye. Check out Match right now for free.
What if your pharmacy didn't act like a pharmacy? What if you never had to sort your pills? And taking your medication was this easy? What if everything was delivered to you, so you never had to waste time standing in line? PillPack is a new kind of pharmacy. We'll sort your medication and deliver it directly to your door. It's your medication made easy. Learn more at PillPack.com.
Tonight, it's so bad and we have to do something about it. Tucker gets new must-see insight from the president only on Fox News Channel. Did you know that 1/3 of Americans are affected by cybercrime? Every time you're online, your private information can be stolen, sold, or exploited. That's why you need NordVPN. Prevent hackers seeing your transaction details, protect your family's online activity, and keep your personal details safe by preventing your information from being tracked online. NordVPN. Protect your family with military-grade encryption on up to 6 devices from just $4 per month at nordvpn.com/TV today.
Hiring was always a huge challenge. Endless hours on job sites with not a lot to show for it. Then, I found ZipRecruiter. They figured out hiring. I post my job, they put it all over the web, and they send me the right people, because their technology is smart. ZipRecruiter often sends me the right person in 24 hours.
ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Try it for free today at ZipRecruiter.com/Fox.
All right, you heard from Marco Rubio a little earlier saying that Senate Republicans are now considering his legislation that would limit and severely restrict Russia if it ever tries to meddle again in a U.S. election. This got a sort of a new lease on life after a number of Republicans particularly criticized the president for his performance of Vladimir Putin, among them saying that the president folded in the face of the Russian strongman. Ohio Republican Senator Rob Portman is a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. It looks like this legislation is still being pushed and will still happen. Republicans are leading the effort. Are you for that effort?
Yeah, I think we need to clarify the fact that we believe the Russians did intervene in our election. We believe, by the way, they try to destabilize democracies around the world, and we need to push back. And Neil, what's interesting about all this is that's the consensus not just of the intelligence community, it's the consensus here on the Hill among Republican-led intelligence committees. In other words, the House and Senate Intelligence Committee came up with the same conclusion. So this is not a matter of dispute. And we have done a number of things here, as you know, from the legislative branch as well, like historic sanctions on Russia, like increasing our military budget, which has been effective in putting more pressure on Russia because we have more troops now in Central and Eastern Europe on exercises, like providing lethal weapons for the first time ever for the Ukrainians, which the Obama administration would not do, despite some of us urging them. So when you look at what Congress has done, we've actually done a number of things to push back. There's a disinformation group now at the State Department that pushes back on Russian and other disinformation that is
But again,
new.
just to be clear, Senator, you believe they did intervene. No one seems to be doubting that. The president seemed to, in his statement yesterday with Vladimir Putin, to question that. Do you believe him when he says he misspoke?
Look, I'm glad he clarified his comments today. I didn't see it live, but I understand he clarified his comments. And, of course, I wish he'd said it in front of President Putin and the world yesterday. But, yeah, I take him at his word. If he says he misspoke, absolutely. But the point is we need to be as one here, pushing back.
And in order to be effective, we also have to be with our allies. We're fortunate, I believe.
Well, what does that mean? What does that mean, sir? I know this is if they ever try this again, but does this address what they've already done? In other words, would you recommend, or does this legislation address what they already have done?
Well, we have sanctions in place for a number of things with Russia, including Crimea, which they illegally took. Not this, and so that may be appropriate. We do have historic levels of sanctions in place already, and I think they're making a difference. In other words, I think one reason President Putin brings up the sanctions a lot is that he's trying to get out from under them.
But I know that, sir. I'm sorry I'm not clear, and I'm sorry I'm being rude here, but do you know then, Senator, whether the president supports this move, that if they were to do this again, you would slap presumably some additional sanctions, and is he in agreement with that? Would he support you in that?
I don't know. You'd have to ask the White House. I do know that the White House more recently has come out to support some efforts some of us are pushing to protect the electoral process. In other words, to ensure that our state boards of election have what they need. Congress, as you know, just appropriated over $300 million to the states to be able to help protect the elections in 2018. So I know that they are supportive of that. The president signed that. And like so many of these other things, Neil, it came from Congress. The president signed it, so that's okay because we're working together on stuff like that. And I think Congress has a role to play to kind of push the administration, just as, frankly, we pushed the Obama administration on sanctions. So I think that's probably the right response. I do think the president, you haven't asked this question, but I'll volunteer it. I think he's too defensive about what happened in the 2016 elections. You know, he won Ohio by 8 points. He would have won Ohio whether the Russians had been engaged in this disinformation campaign and in their meddling or not. And so it's not about the legitimacy of his election. It is about the sanctity of our electoral process here in America, and so we all need to stand up.
Well, have you guys ever gotten together with him on that and say, look, Mr. President, this has nothing to do with the legitimacy of you being duly elected President of the United States. None of this would have changed the numbers or the outcome. You're the guy. You're the winner. Because it keeps coming back to that. I can understand a little bit of his frustration, maybe because he fears every time it's raised, it raises issues about whether he was duly elected, and he was. So I'm wondering whether there was a meeting where you could just say, Mr. President, we have no doubt, we have all the proof in the world, this happened, didn't change the results, but you have got to be leading the charge to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I think that message has been delivered by various folks. I do think that he believes there still are some people, and there are, Neil, there's a handful of people who are going to say that his election was illegitimate, but those people are going to say it anyway. So I think what we have to do is kind of get over that issue and just say what they did, and frankly what they've been doing since 1952 probably with regard to trying to meddle in our elections is unacceptable. Now, they weren't as effective at it until social media gave them, a much more efficient platform to be able to do it.
You're right. It gave a new lease on life. I'm sure you're familiar with this, Chris Kagan. Maybe you're not. The former Belmont County, Ohio chairman stepping down as a result of the president's actions on this. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a rarity, but I understand why he's doing it. I heard a little bit of his interview with you. Belmont County, by the way, used to be a pretty solidly Democratic county, and now President Trump won it, I won it, so it's kind of shifting, and it's a classic.
Did you ever talk to him and say, hey, Chris, maybe not a good idea to do this?
No, he didn't ask for my advice on it. And,
what do you think of his resigning?
Well, I mean, he's got to make his own decision, but I don't think people should be resigning. I think people should instead be speaking up from their positions of influence, whatever they are, whether it's the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates. People said he should step aside because of this. No, he should stay there and continue to give the president the advice that he needs. People should stay in their positions to ensure that we are getting what is the real story, and be straightforward about it.
Do you think, Nancy Pelosi, I believe, Senator, I'm just paraphrasing here so I don't want to misspeak, that the Russians must have something on the president for him not to challenge Vladimir Putin. The president has said a few American presidents have been tougher on the Russians. In fact, he's been the toughest in modern times. The kicking out diplomats, all the arrests, sanctions, and all of that. What do you think of what she's saying, that because in that forum, at least the public forum we saw where the two leaders were up there together, he didn't say anything bad about them. In fact, was effusive in his praise that it didn't sit well.
Yeah, I don't think she's right because, as you say, when you look at the substance, this is the great irony here. You mentioned expelling the diplomats. That was the biggest expulsion, I think, ever. And we actually closed down one of their consular offices on the West Coast as well. Right. I mentioned providing arms to lethal weapons to the Ukrainians, which is something the Russians pushed strongly against. I mentioned the sanctions, which are historic now in place already against Russia. I mentioned the fact that simply rebuilding our military and now taking a more active posture with our other NATO allies in Eastern and Central Europe with these continued troop movements that we've got there to join them in exercises. We just increased the lethality of our armored vehicles there in response to the Russian threat to Eastern Europe and Central Europe. So the actions speak louder than the words, I hope. And so I think that's what's interesting about all this. But both are necessary, because if you don't have strong words, then not only do the Russians wonder, but our allies wonder, and they were listening intently yesterday.
So, just to be clear, I want to, on the record here, that the president, he says he misspoke. A lot of people said he just saw the reaction and decided to pivot, whatever. What do you think?
I'd let the White House answer that question, but I'd take him at his word, and I'm glad he was willing to clarify.
All right, Senator, thank you very much.
Thanks,
for catching up with you. So what was it like in that room? The president was meeting with very few people in that room when he did make this announcement on the Russians and what he really meant. So I want you to meet someone who was there.
I actually went out and reviewed a clip of... Liberty Mutual accident forgiveness means they won't hike your rates over one mistake. See? Liberty Mutual doesn't hold grudges.
For drivers with accident forgiveness, Liberty Mutual won't raise their rates because of their first accident.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
What is love? Two hearts, one soul. It's the journey and the destination. It's vows made and promises kept. Feed your hunger, quench your thirst, live your dreams. Call 1-800-SANDALS.
This is not a video game. This is not a screensaver. This is the destruction of a cancer cell by the body's own immune system, thanks to medicine that didn't exist until now, and today can save your life.
Guys, is this you? Busting out of your pants? Out of shape? No energy or drive? Then you need Nutrisystem for Men.
I'm Chris, and I lost 120 pounds on Nutrisystem.
I'm Essex, and I lost 43 pounds on Nutrisystem. Lose up to 18 pounds and 8 inches overall in your first month. Money back guarantee. Real guys, real results. Put down the wings, pick up the phone, and get with the program today. Order your 28-day plan now and save 40% off every program. That's 40% off breakfast, lunches, dinners, and snacks. For a limited time, save 40%. Plus, get 1 week of all new NutriPro shakes, packed with 20 grams of protein to help shrink your gut, free.
The food was delicious.
I love the food. Pasta, pizza, so good. Plus, we'll throw in FedEx shipping free.
It was perfect for guys like me who don't like to cook.
Lose up to 18 pounds and 8 inches overall in your first month.
It's simple. You eat the food, you lose the weight.
Go online or call 877-372-THIN and get free shakes plus 40% off every program.
It's so convenient. The dark web is a supermarket where identity thieves buy and sell your personal information. In fact, millions of identities are stolen every year. But now you can protect yourself with Experian. See if your social security number, phone, and email are at risk with a free dark web triple scan at Experian.com/scan. Experian. Identity protection has a new identity.
All right, not exactly Putin-smootin', but to hear executive giant Bob Nardelli tell it, he's much more worried about the trade situation than anything going on here. He's next after this.
Adulthood comes with many responsibilities, but you can get in your car and drive to Arby's for a $1 Coke float. So, it's a wash. Arby's, we have the meat.
This is a story about mail and packages. And it's also a story about people. People who rely on us every day to deliver their dreams.
They're handing us more than mail. They're handing us their business. And while we make more e-commerce deliveries to homes than anyone else in the country, we never forget that your business is our business. The United States Postal Service. Priority, you.
You might take something for your heart or joints, but do you take something for your brain? With an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish, Prevagen has been shown in clinical trials to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
You think of this global turmoil over what the president meant to say, did say, would have said if he could say it all over again with Vladimir Putin, that the markets would be panicking. They were not panicking, just like they really haven't been panicking through this ongoing trade tit-for-tat, now escalated to trade war. The Dow about 55.5 points today. With us now is former Chrysler Home Depot CEO, Bob Nardelli. It's interesting, Bob, because you were quickly telling me during the break, as important as this Putin dust-up is, and what the president said or didn't say, you're far more focused on trade issues, aren't you?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that depending on what was said or not said or intended, that creates such a distraction because, you know, as I talk to my fellow CEOs, the economy is really percolating here. I mean, if you think about where it's going in spite of tariffs, in spite of sanctions, in spite of some of the things that are being discussed, you know, I really feel very optimistic about corporate America. They're turning in great profits. They're reinvesting capital based upon the administration's previous tax programs. You know, the 2.0 is out.
Well, that stuff's good.
It's great.
So what do you advise the president when you see a dust-up and confusion over the Putin thing or the trade stuff? What do you say?
Well, who am I to advise the President of the United States? But it is
Fortune 500 bigwig.
It's very unfortunate. If it was a misstatement yesterday, it's very.
You believe it was?
If he says it is, I want to believe it was. Okay. I mean, I can't believe that he would be 180 degrees from where he was through his campaigns and what he's been saying all along relative to collusion and involvement. I mean,
but I was talking to someone before the show, Bob, who said even if it wasn't, and it's a pivot, and he realized he might have made a mistake or did.
Yes.
That's noteworthy itself, and that's a good sign.
Yes, yeah. The fact that he's out, I mean, correcting himself.
Yeah,
and I think he had to. I think that would have dominated, you know, all of the good things that are going on. Unfortunately, and we got a lot of good things going on in America today, in corporate America particularly.
Except when it comes to trade.
Well, I think we have to be. You made a very good point. You know, the volatility in the market. You didn't see it today based on that comment. You know, we've had some great days and we've had some very bad days, but overall, we still seem to be moving in the right direction. So there's a lot of discussion about tariffs, but let's wait and see what actually takes place. You know,
so you think we're going to get something, and that this will force someone's hand, Europe's hand, China's hand?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think the only certainty right now is uncertainty. You know, change is the only constant. And I watched this president, and you know, he reminds me a lot of my mentor, Jack Welch. We'd go into a meeting, he'd ask for 100. I'd go in asking for 50. We'd settle on 75. I think I won. He think he won. And at the end of the
I should have tried that here. I found out all the other anchors are paid, Bob. It really bothered me.
Well, I think you're doing okay.
All right.
You do a great job.
But what do you think of the way the market has been responding to this trade dip? Maybe they're convinced, for what you said, that, hey, it's all going to work out. We've doubted the president before, and gosh, you know, if things haven't gone his way and our way, and we're all richer for it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, he's a very direct person. He kind of says what's on his mind. It's not always filtered. But if you look at what he's done, he really has delivered a lot to people here in the United States. If you look at tax rate, what he's talking about doing now on the middle class,
follow-up, right?
To continue to follow up to help them. If you look at all the participants that will be in the zero tax bracket, if you look at corporations, again, being able to write off 100% of the expense of their investments. I mean, the only thing will be the deferral issue on some of these profits offshore. May not like, but overall, I think he can.
Better than what they had.
Right? Better than what they had. He keeps moving our country forward, Neil, and that's a good thing.
All right. Bob, always good seeing you. Bob Nardelli, former Home Depot CEO, former Chrysler CEO, GE Bigwig, you name it, what a resume. All right, when we come back, do you ever wonder what was going on in that room when the president was meeting with key economic aides, lawmakers, talking about a new tax cut, and then this need to address the whole Vladimir Putin thing? What was it like in that room before the president issued his mea culpa? We have a guy who was there after this.
Some clarification.
I have type 2 diabetes. I'm trying to manage my A1C. Then I learned type 2 diabetes puts me at greater risk for heart attack or stroke. Can one medicine help treat both blood sugar and cardiovascular risk? I asked my doctor. She told me about non-insulin Victoza. Victoza is not only proven to lower A1C and blood sugar, but for people with type 2 diabetes treating their cardiovascular disease, Victoza is also approved to lower the risk of major CV events, such as heart attack, stroke, or death. While not for weight loss, Victoza may help you lose some weight.
Victoza is not for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not take Victoza if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Victoza or any of its ingredients. Stop taking Victoza and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck or symptoms of a serious allergic reaction such as rash, swelling, difficulty breathing, or swallowing. Serious side effects may happen, including pancreatitis. So stop taking Victoza and call your doctor right away if you have severe pain in your stomach area. Tell your doctor your medical history. Gallbladder problems have happened in some people. Tell your doctor right away if you get symptoms. Taking Victoza with the sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar. Common side effects are nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, decreased appetite, indigestion, and constipation. Side effects can lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
Change the course of your treatment. Ask your doctor about Victoza.
Why are drivers 50 and over switching to the AARP auto insurance program from the Hartford? Let's take a ride with some actual customers and find out. Hey, well, tell me about your experience when you switched to the Hartford.
When I switched to the Hartford, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I should have turned 50 years ago. They saved me a bunch of money. You can't beat that.
What blows me away about the Hartford is their lifetime renewability. Now, this is their promise not to drop you, even if you have an accident.
I know when I'm driving, I'm covered.
Drivers 50 and over can save hundreds of dollars when they switch to the AARP auto insurance program from the Hartford and get other incredible benefits like lifetime renewability. Not an AARP member? The Hartford can help you join in minutes. Call the Hartford to request your free quote at 1-800-348-4404 or go to gohartfordauto.com today.
A new client just said, until I signed with Binder & Binder, I was scared about winning my Social Security disability case.
We'll deal with the government. You have enough to worry about.
Don't be scared. Call 800-4-BINDER.
IHOP's turning 60 with a pancake party. And yes, we said IHOP with a P. Because the B was just a stunt to promote our burgers. Today, celebrate our 60th with 60-cent pancakes at IHOP with a P.
All right, it's going to seem like Ohio Day on this show. I just want to clarify here that I was very happy to get anyone who was in the room with the president in that meeting where he was talking up tax cuts, and then lo and behold, we found out that he wanted to make an address to stipulate exactly what he meant when he was with Vladimir Putin, and lo and behold, Ohio Republican Congressman Tim Renacci joins us. He was in that room, and Congressman, great to have you. What was that like? Was the president, before he explained to the public and the press, telling you guys what he meant as well?
No, actually, we all heard it at the same time, but the president, it's always great to be in the room with the president because you do get the sense of his real concern for America, concern for the American worker, and also concern that he made, the difference in the words. And that's why, how many presidents would really step up and say, hey, I said the wrong word, and I meant it this way? I think it was important, if nothing else, and I think it was a good way of starting the meeting, even though we quickly went into the tax 2.0.
Now, Nancy Pelosi has issued a statement on that clarification, what she calls a backtracking. President Trump's attempt to walk back the dangerous, disgraceful, and damaging show of his Blame America First policy embarrasses our nation even further. She goes on to say, Congressman, after watching the president cower in front of Putin, the American people now deserve to know what Trump will do now. What do you think he has to do now?
Well, it's interesting, Neil, because those same people that are, they were high-fiving when President Obama said to Governor Romney that, that Russia was not a threat. These are the same people that are criticizing this president. They're also, no one was talking about the President Obama when he reached over and said to Vladimir Putin, hey, I'll be able to do more after the next election. These are the things that are so frustrating for me, a business guy, coming to Washington, because it's politics as usual. And again, Nancy Pelosi is just using politics as usual to make a position which just isn't true. You heard the president say that he was wrong, and he moved on. But he also said...
that he was wrong as much as he misspoke.
Well, that's what I mean. He misspoke and he said the wrong word.
Let me ask you a little bit about that, if you don't mind, Congressman. It's fed this maybe black helicopter crowd narrative that maybe, this is Nancy Pelosi saying this, other Democrats have been saying this, Vladimir Putin has something on him. Otherwise, he would have been more forceful, but he wasn't. What do you think of that?
Well, look, we don't know what all the president said in the 2-hour meeting on one-on-one, but I do know what he talked about. It was concerns. He also believes that we have to be able to deal and be able to talk with Russia. We have to be able to live within them. They're the part of the global family, whether we like them or not. That doesn't mean we have to trust them, but we have to talk to them. So the president is a business guy. He's somebody who uses his business sense to make decisions. I mean, I see so much of that because I was a business guy for 28 years. Sometimes you have to use business sense versus political sense. And again, that's really the difference. I get so tired of the political talking points. I do believe, look, there was no collusion. If there was collusion, it would have already shown up in all the hearings and all the investigations, whether it's the FBI, all the different organizations. So what we really need to do is realize, yes, was there some meddling? Absolutely. Do we agree with that? I think the president even said that today. But in the end, there was no collusion. And I think the elections in 2016, as we all know, would have not changed. None of the things that Russia did would have changed these elections. And we really do need to move forward because...
Well, let me ask you about moving forward, because some of your colleagues in the United States Senate, led by Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, are pushing legislation that would punish Russia if it even thought of doing something like this again, though it does not address its involvement in the 2016 election with additional sanctions for now. Does that have your support?
Well, remember, I said we need to move forward, but that moving forward means that if Russia does this, yes, we absolutely need to be able to go after them.
But I was surprised, sir, that Senator Rob Portman didn't know whether the president would go along with that. I thought someone would run that up the flagpole. No?
No, I think the president's pretty thoughtful. He'll listen to those, what we're talking about doing. But at the end...
What's to debate there? Of course, if you're going to cheat again, we're going to sanction you at the yin-yang.
I think, like anything here in Washington, it's all about what's in the bill or what's in the writing or what's actually spelled out. Too many times we agree or think we agree to something, and then we read it. So I'm always a big believer. I don't sign off on anything unless I've read it, seen it, and understand what it's all about. But I think the concept is good, and I think the president probably would support it. But, again, he would have to make that decision.
Got it. Congressman, thank you very much. Good seeing you again.
Thank you. You too, Neil.
All right, the read from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. What does he do right now after this?
Still a chance here. It's Willingham. Edge of the box. Willingham shoots. Goal! That was magic. Willingham tucks it in and puts the championship to bed. Sweet dreams.
As long as soccer players celebrate with a slide, you can count on Geico saving folks money. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Pressure. What pressure? The players on the...
You rely on TripAdvisor so you don't miss out on the perfect hotel. But did you know you can also use TripAdvisor so you don't miss out on the best price? TripAdvisor searches over 200 booking sites to find the hotel you want for the lowest price, saving you up to 30%. So you can spend less time missing out and more time paddling out. TripAdvisor. Visit tripadvisor.com or download the app.
I'm young. I'm not supposed to have high blood pressure.
If you just learned you have high blood pressure, or you're already treating it with medication, you can benefit from adding the Zona Plus to your treatment plan.
Medication is not the answer all the time for treatment of blood pressure.
The Zona Plus therapy is safe and easy to do, at home or on the go. Each daily treatment takes only 12 minutes. Do it while you're watching TV, during breakfast, relaxing, even before a workout.
I started using the Zona, and within the first 2 weeks, I was noticing a big difference. It was very exciting.
I've been using it now for about a year and a half, and I absolutely love it.
The Zona Plus is a drug-free, software-controlled, handheld device that's clinically proven to help lower blood pressure. If you are not a fan of prescriptions, the idea of using a non-invasive medical device seems like a great alternative. The science behind the Zona Plus is based on an isometric technology, which was initially developed by a respected cardiopulmonary physiologist. The same technology evolved into the patented Zona Plus therapy.
Every once in a while, I remind him, "Are you doing your Zona?" And he'll say, "Yep."
Every day. Neither of us take any medication for blood pressure anymore. It's all done.
In studies, 90% of people lowered their blood pressure from 10 to 15 points in as few as 4 to 8 weeks.
I'm the type of person that needs to be in control of my life. And the Zona Plus gives me that opportunity to be in control of my blood pressure. And that is such an empowering feeling.
And with the company's fantastic 90-day money-back guarantee, backed by a full refund of the purchase price, there's no risk. You have everything to gain by giving Zona Plus a try for 90 days. Call now at 800-30-2039 or visit us online at zonaplus.com.
All right, just because the president sort of clarified his position on what he really meant to say to Vladimir Putin does not mean that the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, might not still be compelled to testify on Capitol Hill about Russia. Mike Emanuel is there with the very latest. Mike, what are we looking at here?
Well, Neil, we've been hearing calls from folks here on Capitol Hill basically saying they want to hear from top Trump administration officials. And we've learned that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is going to come up here to Capitol Hill next Wednesday. You can expect plenty of questions about the briefings that went into this trip to Helsinki, that summit that has gotten bad reviews here on Capitol Hill from many folks. Senator Lindsey Graham this afternoon tweeted about the summit, basically saying, quote, "President Trump was right today when he said we need to better secure our election system, and we can only have peace through strength." A lot of folks concerned because, of course, there are midterm elections in 4 months, and they say there is a need for action. As for the Democrat side of things, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is not buying the president's response.
President Trump tried to squirm away from what he said yesterday. It's 24 hours too late and in the wrong place. If the president can't say directly to President Putin that he is wrong and we are right and our intelligence agencies are right, it's ineffective and worse, another sign of weakness.
So in the aftermath of the president's clarification, no surprise Democrats are not satisfied, and many Republicans are expressing some relief. Neil?
All right, Mike, thank you very, very much. Now let's go to Daily Mail White House correspondent Francesca Chambers. Francesca, did this settle the waters or no?
Well, we'll have to see. It's still a little bit early yet, but it's pretty clear, Neil, that the White House felt that they needed to settle the waters. We didn't have a White House press briefing today. However, President Trump spoke directly to camera to address this. And what I think is something that is very, very interesting is that the White House said beforehand that they would be opening up what we call a pool spray, which happens at the top of this meeting, so that the president could address this. And sometimes he'll take questions from reporters. They don't always say what topic they expect him to speak on, but they said that it would be on this Helsinki summit, again acknowledging that the president did have something to clarify even before it happened.
You know, do you know the genesis for this turnaround or clarification, whatever they're calling it, Francesca? I'm told that when the president was leaving Helsinki on Air Force One, he was very surprised at the wrath of a number of conservative commentators, Republicans, who were just apoplectic over this, and he didn't see that one coming. What do you think?
Well, the president even acknowledged that when he spoke today, Neil. He said that he was surprised that when he got back in Washington to see what was happening, and it was after he reviewed the transcript, he said, that he realized that there had been that double negative or that misspeak that made it sound like he was saying that Russia maybe didn't meddle in the United States election and that he believed Vladimir Putin. So I think that after watching all the reviews today that came in across networks, it wasn't just the regular ones that he likes to hit, it was across all of the networks, and hearing Republicans even saying that he might need to reverse course, as Anthony Scaramucci said, the president then came out and said, oops, that's not what I meant to say, which is something that we rarely hear this president say.
He needed a transcript. I mean, he could have looked at a tape or whatever, because the tape was very convincing. He felt very much that this was much ado about nothing, or gave the impression that Vladimir Putin was right, that he felt that there was nothing there. So that was really a big 180 here, but I'm just wondering what it means now.
And of course, we're hoping, as reporters, that we'll have an opportunity to continue questioning the White House about this. The president did not take questions after he delivered that statement, so there hasn't been an opportunity to press further on what he may have meant and to clarify further some of those comments that he made between yesterday and what we heard today. We could have a press briefing later on this week where we'll have an opportunity to talk to Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, about this, and you can be sure that this would probably be a top topic.
Yeah, I don't want to just spring this on you, but do you know, Francesca, whether he supports this now? Francesca, thank you very, very much. Francesca, thank you very, very much. Francesca Chambers, the Daily White House correspondent, Daily Mail. Again, so much we don't know, this much we do. The president took a controversy, tried to damp it down a little bit by clarifying things. Now, whether that will be enough to satisfy everybody, we shall see. The 5 is now.
Do you know which investment could be your best performer this year? Stocks? Real estate? Bonds? None of the above. It's silver. It's trending higher. And if silver returns to its all-time high, that's over a 200% increase. Call now to get this free.
Silver is running out. It's in short supply. It's one of the greatest investments you could have right now.
Call Lear Capital for your free report, Sky High Silver. See why silver could skyrocket 50% this year. Why financial experts and investment banks are hoarding silver at today's low price, and how silver can help protect your savings from global turmoil.
Investing in silver is the perfect way to protect your wealth.
Ask how you can get up to $2,000 in free silver. This offer ends soon. Call 1-800-885-1955. 1-800-885-1955.
Her salon was booked for weeks, until her laptop crashed this morning. You never know what the day's going to bring when you're running a small business. It might even bring a blue screen of death. Having IT problems? Ask a business advisor how to get virus and spyware removal and 24/7 tech support. Office Depot now offers on-demand tech support for as little as $15 a month. Right now, buy one HPA can get a second and 30% off at Office Depot, Office Max.
It was getting to be a struggle to get in and out of the tub.
Yeah, we were really worried about falling.
And we needed a solution to stay safe in our own home.
So we got an American Standard walk-in bath.
American Standard is celebrating over 140 years in business with our best offer on our walk-in tubs.
They have a lifetime warranty on the bath, the installation, including the labor. I've never heard of that before.
American Standard has the only walk-in bath with over 20 comfort and safety features, including an ultra-low entryway, 44 massaging jets to help relieve aches and pains, and our patented technology which rapidly drains the tub so you can exit quickly. Other brands can leave you sitting in the cold. So call now for your free information kit. For a limited time, get $1,500 in savings, including a free American Standard right height toilet.
Don't delay. Call 1-800-425-8414 for your free information kit and $1,500 in savings, including a free toilet. That's 1-800-425-8414.
No matter who rides point, there are over 10,000 Allstate agents riding sweet. Call one today. Are you in good hands? Sex, drugs, and Steven Tyler.
There was a point where I didn't have a band, and I didn't care.
Aerosmith's legendary frontman on his wild ride and what the future holds next.
I'm bionic. I'm just gonna keep going.
Objectifying Steven Tyler, Sunday on Fox News Channel.
Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld with Charlie Hurt, that's true. Marie Harp, Jesse Waters, and she can log roll on a crayon. Dana Perino, the 5. must be ending, meaning it's Tuesday on cable news.
It's just as serious to me as the Cuban Missile Crisis in terms of an attack or the 9/11 attack. I would say that his performance today will live in infamy as much as the Pearl Harbor attack or Kristallnacht.
Curious point in American government. When do we see almost a shadow government come out and say, we cannot side with the government, whether it's the cabinet or the Senate?
Amazing. CNN is literally seeing shadows now. I think there's medication for that. Now, Trump addressed the controversy today, and we're going to get to that. But if he's a Russian plant, he's the worst one ever. I mean, what kind of plant would try to force Germany to cancel its Russian oil contracts? Oil being Russia's only major export besides spies? What kind of plant would demand that NATO up their military spending to straitjacket Mad Vlad? What kind of plant boosts our military by billions, which allows us to do whatever the hell we want until forever? I say an awesome plant. Seriously, you gotta be nuts if you think he's the Manchurian candidate. John Brennan does, and he voted for a commie at the height of the Cold War. I guess he's the expert. Maybe Trump should have talked tough but sent a few $1 billion to Moscow on pallets instead. So Donald lost the crazy pants vote. So what? The world is Donkey Kong, and we're always stuck at the same level, especially with Russia. But perhaps, like North Korea, this could be different. Putin's a thug, but you can still chat with a thug while racking up points in his own backyard. Trump played nice, maybe too nice, despite the media screeching for a catfight. But I say smile in Putin's face, then screw him if you must everywhere else. Maybe Trump should have skipped the presser altogether. But ask yourself this. If your TV was off and you never heard about this story, would you have noticed anything different in your life? Just that it was gradually getting better? Jobs, the economy, taxes, terror. Trump's winning on a lot of things. But even if you're winning, you could always do better. All right, let's go to the news. By the way, a meaningful monologue.
One of the best.
Thank you.
But you say that every single monologue.
I do.
In the break before you go, say, Charlie, you're going to love my monologue.
It was good. We got to talk about Trump's clarification today on the fact that he misspoke.
Faith and support for America's great intelligence agencies. Always had. And I have felt very strongly that while Russia's actions had no impact at all on the outcome of the election, let me be totally clear in saying that, and I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place. Could be other people also. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia.
All right, so Dana, I'm reminded of myself. I had 3 older sisters when I was forced to apologize to my sisters in order so I could come.
There, did your mom write it for you?
Yes, exactly. I'm still a little confused by that clarification. Like, is this
it's
genius?
It's one of those clarifications that if you said would or would not, you would want to clarify it within 24 minutes,
right?
Probably not 24 hours. I do respect that he understood that he had to clarify. He decided to do that. He read from a written statement, didn't take questions, so there was nothing off script except for the added, but there could have been other people also, which basically negated most of what he was saying. But I think one of the most important things he did is he recognized that he had a problem with the intelligence community, and it's critical for any commander-in-chief to have a good relationship with them because you have to rely on them because your responsibility is to protect the American people, and you can't do that if you don't have intel and a good relationship with them. So I think that's what he was trying to do. Words do matter. They have consequences. Being nice is fine, but I also think that in this case, to your point about the deeds, he does the right things and says the wrong things.
Right.
Is it better then to say all the right things, but to do the wrong things? But you could have both.
You could have both. That is true.
If you're doing good things, you should be able to say the good things.
Dana, I disagree. You can only have 2 choices. Or my theory falls flat. Jesse, what did you make of the clarification?
It's a gaffe, if you believe the explanation that he misspoke, which is historic. He's never admitted he's made a mistake or misspoke, ever. So I think this is pretty significant. But if you don't believe it and you believe he really meant to say it, then you think it's just kind of a sloppy or a little slick cleanup. Maybe he could have cleaned it up like I had suggested on Tucker or Hannity, he had to wait a little long, but he definitely looked upset. I just want to talk about the montage and the monologue for a little bit. There's always a constant in Washington. Republicans will always underdeliver, and Democrats will always overreach. Because this is what they did here. He makes a gaffe at a summit, and now the left is calling for a coup.
Yeah.
We heard this before, though. You remember, we've seen the Access Hollywood tape, Charlottesville, firing James Comey, the Khan family controversy, separating kids, and Stormy Daniels, all of these things, they've all said, it's the Holocaust. It's another 9/11. It's a constitutional crisis. Impeachment, internment camps. But I think the country is tuning this out. We've become numb to this type of hyperbole because the Democrats always overreach. Now they want to abolish ICE. Now they're chasing people out of restaurants and they're fantasizing about assassinations. It always ends up coming back, boomeranging them and hurting them politically. And I think this is going to be the same thing.
Marie, do you think it's true that part of the problem is it's the boy who cried wolf, but it's the boy who cried collusion, the boy who cried impeachment? So when it happens, even it's just like not this again, because I know next week there's going to be something that makes this look small, right?
I can't even imagine what that would be, and that sort of makes my head
try
hurt.
to guess.
I don't even want to try to guess. I do think the Democrats need to be careful not to cry a crisis over everything, because what we saw yesterday was genuinely appalling. And when you are asked, do I side with the intelligence community or Putin? That is not a hard answer. That doesn't require clarification. There is one answer, and the president didn't give it. And my question continues to be, why not? Why will the president not say that Russia did it unequivocally? He didn't even do that today. Does he not believe it? And there's a whole host of reasons we can look at. It ends with collusion, but there's a bunch of things before that, right? Is it ego? Is it he's afraid that he will look like an illegitimate president? But the bottom line is, Dan Coats, the head of national intelligence, last week said publicly, the warning signs about Russian interference today in our upcoming election is like the blinking red lights we saw before 9/11.
Too bad Obama didn't feel that way.
Wait, this isn't about Barack Obama. This is about Donald Trump.
Kinda.
It's not.
It happened under his watch, Marie.
How
dare you?
Donald Trump is president today, and his intelligence chief said this is like what we saw before 9/11 in terms of a threat. And Donald Trump, by not standing up to Russia yesterday or today, is not countering that threat, and that should be a problem to all Americans.
See, I would disagree with Coates on this, mainly because the difference between radical Islam and threats like Russia is existential. Radical Islam wants to destroy the world. Russia is just another power.
Well, they're trying to undermine our democracy, which is just as bad.
And also, one, it manages to kill lots of innocent people on a routine basis. The other is inexcusable, but and should be combated, but is not killing thousands of innocent women and children, every year. Clearly, the president made a mistake yesterday in his in that performance, but it was just a performance. The mistake he made was he conflated the whole business about the hacking into the DNC servers and this business about collusion. And that's when you're president of the United States, you cannot do that, especially if you're standing next to a thug like Vladimir Putin. But on the flip, I get a little bit kind of, sort of hesitant about all of this incredible outrage about all of it, because of course that's exactly what the press does every day, and they have done for the past 2 years: conflate Russian meddling with collusion. And they say that, we have proof of Russian meddling, therefore you colluded. And he's a defensive guy. He's always going to punch back, and he's just defensive. But he's a bigger guy than that. He needs to ignore that stuff. People don't listen to the lunatics who are talking about collusion now. He doesn't need to answer that question. Just say that Russia meddled with our elections, knock it off, whatever, and then move on.
Yeah. I think we have time. I want to play this other side of Donald Trump talking about the relationship with Russia that he was hoping to have.
The matters we discussed are profound in their importance and have the potential to save millions of lives. I understand the many disagreements between our countries, but I also understand that dialogue at when you think about a dialogue with Russia or dialogue with other countries, but dialogue with Russia in this case, where we've had such poor relationships for so many years, dialogue is a very important thing, and it's a very good thing. So if we get along with them, great. If we don't get along with them, then we won't get along with them. But I think we have a very good chance of having some very positive things.
So, Dana, this is why I'm not surprised or shocked about what's been happening, is because he was saying the same thing during the campaign about Russia all the time, and he sounds very liberal, by the way.
This is a traditional liberal position. Dialogue with Russia, the USSR.
As Jesse pointed out, I mean, every president, we'll just go to, as Brett Baer said today, every president since Eisenhower has been trying to have good relations with Russia, and it never works out. So to me, that points out that there's a common denominator here. It's not our fault.
Yeah.
It's their actions, and I think that was another thing that he probably could have done, is to say, like, I'm not blaming the United States for this. This is his fault. But again, I go back to the deeds. I think it'll be interesting to see if anything happens on Crimea, sanctions, or Syria.
Iran.
I actually think in some ways Putin may have thought that he won yesterday, but at the end of today, I think that Putin's in a much weaker position.
So you're saying Trump is a genius?
This was all planned.
He was all planned. This was like 4-level chess.
Yes, you see? Underwater.
But the president does do this thing where he throws these flashbang grenades, and you know what nobody's talking about right now? How terrible Brett Kavanaugh is.
Wow. Is he terrible?
That's what
I get your point.
On the Gutfeld show.
All right, cool. All right, we got to move. Anybody else want to say anything?
Good.
How great Jesse's hair looks?
Fantastic.
It does.
I need a cut, though.
I know.
What about the new hairdo?
Yeah.
We're working on it. We're in a transitional phase.
All right. Okay. Barack Obama returns to the spotlight to go after President Trump. His latest insults next.
Johnny Bench. You know, when I feel like I've been hit by a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, I use Blue Emu Maximum Arthritis Cream. With its non-greasy, depenetrating formula, it gets down deep into those joints for big-time pain relief. Blue Emu, it works fast and you won't stink.
Whatever you do to stay healthy, you might be missing something. Your eyes. That's why there's Ocuvite. Ocuvite helps replenish nutrients your eyes can lose as you age. It has lutein, zeaxanthin, and omega-3. Ocuvite. Be good to your eyes.
My father passed his truck down to me. It's the same thing I want to do with you.
It's an emotional thing to watch a child grow up, and especially get behind the wheel.
I want to keep, stacking up the memories and the miles and the years.
He's going to get mine, but I'm going to get a new one.
When it's time for your old Chevy truck to become their new Chevy truck, there's Truck Month. Get 18% of MSRP cash back on all Silverado 1500 Crew Cab LT pickups when you finance with GM Financial. That's $9,000 on this Silverado. Plus, during Truck Month, make no monthly payments for 90 days.
You shouldn't be rushed into booking a hotel. With Expedia's add-on advantage, booking a flight unlocks discounts on select hotels until the day you leave for your trip. Add-on advantage, only when you book with Expedia.
Running a business means I can't waste time, especially when I'm hiring. I used to pore over resumes, but now I post my jobs on Indeed. Their screener questions help me get to my shortlist, people with the qualifications I need, like 5 years experience. All saving me time that I get to put back into running my business. Hiring's better when you've got your shortlist. Learn how screener questions can save you time when you post your job on Indeed.
When heartburn hits, fight back fast with TUM Smoothies. It neutralizes stomach acid at the source. Smoothies. And introducing new TUM Sugar Free.
This is a story about mail and packages. And it's also a story about people. People who rely on us every day to deliver their dreams. They're handing us more than mail. They're handing us their business. And while we make more e-commerce deliveries to homes than anyone else in the country, we never forget that your business is our business. The United States Postal Service. Priority, you.
Then who has the upper hand now? Start winning today. Book now at LQ.com.
Salon Pas. We're the world leader in medicinal pain patches. Our latest innovation, Salon Pas Lidocaine, using hydrogel-based technology with the maximum strength lidocaine you can buy without a prescription. Salon Pas Lidocaine. Nothing is proven stronger or more effective against pain.
Tonight, it's so bad and we have to do something about it. Tucker gets new must-see insight. President.
Blood pressure.
If you just learned you have high blood pressure, or you're already treating it with medication, you can benefit from adding the Zona Plus to your treatment plan.
Medication is not the answer all the time for treatment of blood pressure.
The Zona Plus therapy is safe and easy to do, at home or on the go. Each daily treatment takes only 12 minutes. Do it while you're watching TV, during breakfast, relaxing, even before a workout.
I started using the Zona, and within the first 2 weeks, I was noticing a big difference. It was very exciting.
I've been using it now for about a year and a half, and I absolutely love it.
The Zona Plus is a drug-free, software-controlled handheld device that's clinically proven to help lower blood pressure. If you are not a fan of prescriptions, the idea of using a non-invasive medical device seems like a great alternative. The science behind the Zona Plus is based on an isometric technology, which was initially developed by a respected cardiopulmonary physiologist. The same technology evolved into the patented Zona Plus therapy.
Every once in a while, I remind him, are you doing your Zona? And he'll say, yep.
Every day. Neither of us take any medication for blood pressure anymore. It's all done.
In studies, 90% of people lowered their blood pressure from 10 to 15 points in as few as 4 to 8 weeks.
I'm the type of person that needs to be in control of my life. And the Zona Plus gives me that opportunity to be in control of my blood pressure. And that is such an empowering feeling.
And with the company's fantastic 90-day money-back guarantee, backed by a full refund of the purchase price, there's no risk. You have everything to gain by giving Zona Plus a try for 90 days. Call now at 800-830-2039 or visit us online at zonaplus.com.
If there's one thing we all know about Juan Williams, it's that he's a diehard sports fan. The Washington Nationals are one of his true loves, next to his wife and kids, of course. So we decided to ship him back to D.C. for a behind-the-scenes look at tonight's Major League Baseball All-Star Game at Nationals Park. Juan, you must be like a kid in a candy store there.
Maria, you got it right. I'm sort of ecstatic. You know, it's like that John Fogerty song, The Sun Came Out, Put Me in, Coach, I'm ready to play. I'm on the field at Nationals Park. You got to tell Greg, I ran into some San Francisco Giants, Brandon Crawford. Bud Black of the Colorado Rockies just came over to say hello. He's a 5 fan, folks.
Oh, I know him. I know his record very well.
Here. No kid. Oh, look at that. And, you know, it's just been an extraordinary time. Last night they had the home run derby. You got to tell Jesse that Reese Hopkins of the Phillies put on a show. But of course,
Bryce Harper was the winner, wasn't he? Didn't Bryce Harper win?
Yeah, Bryce. He came back at the end in spectacular fashion and had this place rocking. Like, I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm a season ticket holder. I haven't seen Nationals Park rock like that before. It was spectacular.
Well, Juan, I'm so glad that you weren't here yesterday and today because you would have just been screaming about Trump, and we had some fill-ins that weren't as angry, and it was really nice that you were down there. Well, you look great.
Well,
I think you should put your collar up, too.
I should flip it up like a Jesse Waters thing? I don't know if it'll work. I'm trying, man. I'm trying to be as hip as Jesse, but Jesse, you're the younger generation. And by the way, yesterday I got to talk with the players, and Jesse, they're younger than you. It's unbelievable.
Younger than 40.
Yeah, I mean,
imagine
yeah,
that.
well, they're all in their 20s, you know?
I've got a question. Juan, I have a question. How did Washington, D.C. land this opportunity to be the venue for this All-Star game?
Well, this is an interesting question, Dana, because the learners who own the team have been asking for some time, and they finally got it. But the problem, and this is so interesting, it's just like logistics and TV, they couldn't get the convention center, and they needed the convention center. They have a huge exhibit over there, old-timers, Hall of Famers, you know, meet and greet sessions for fans, and they got it this year, and so it came in. But this is a brand new ballpark, I would say now about 5 years old, and so they've been angling to try to get it, and boy, has the town responded. Everything from the Library of Congress to the Congress itself, all really putting on the show for Major League Baseball.
Hey, Juan, after the rain, the field looks soggier than a truck driver's underpants. I was curious, can you drink at the field?
Yeah, can you drink?
Yeah. Can you drink it there? Or is it a dry, I don't know, I've never been there.
Juan's drunk right now.
Well, you know, so here's the thing. So Deb Cody, who's the producer from The Five, is with me. We got caught in the Nationals dugout, and all of a sudden it flooded, Greg. It flooded. I mean, we couldn't get out.
And so they had to put chairs down like a bridge so that we could walk out. Wow. It was hilarious. But they had pumps. They brought out pumps, and they looked like, stricken with fear that something was going to interfere with the game. The players are just coming out now for batting practice. But it worked. They drank it up.
Wow. Hey, Juan, Charlie Hurt here. How are you?
Hey, Charlie. I know you're a Nats fan, Charlie.
Yeah, so the number of times that I've run into you in that very park, it's kind of amazing. But I'd say I'm rather jealous, but I won't hold that against you right now. The real question that I want to know is, after last night's amazing performance by Bryce Harper, and I mean the dramatics of his that sort of come from behind in the last final 15-20 seconds was pretty astonishing. Is this going to turn the season around for Bryce Harper?
Well, there's so many questions around Harper, so I was telling you guys that, yesterday I got to talk to all the players, and, the biggest crowds were around two players, Manny Machado of the Baltimore Orioles, and again, he's on the trade block because I think the Orioles can't afford him. And then the other one was Bryce Harper, and the question is, does Bryce Harper stay in Washington after this season? He's not having a great season average-wise. He's hitting the home runs. And then the question becomes, well, is that worth $400 million, Charlie? I don't know. They've got some other people coming up. But I got to tell you, after last night, it's clear Bryce Harper owns this town. And his face, he's like the franchise player. Ryan Zimmerman has been the franchise player here for years. Bryce Harper is clearly the face of the Washington Nationals. And the question is that worth something in and of itself, even if his average is below average at the moment?
So, Juan, last question here. Who's going to win tonight? The American League or the National League? Put your money on it.
Well, I'm a National League guy. I grew up as a Mets fan in Brooklyn. Now I'm a Nationals fan. In between, I rooted for the Orioles when Washington didn't have a team.
Right.
But the track record's pretty clear, Dana. The American League wins for, I think, 4 of the last 5, if not all of the last 5 times. We got Max Scherzer out here, and Chris Sale of the Red Sox starting. Those are 2 great pitchers, but it really comes down to the back end. Then we'll see who wins. But if you had to pick, Dana, put your money on the AL.
All right, got it. Okay, Juan, we will be watching tonight. Have fun. Stay tuned because one more thing is up next.
Yeah. Run me, mama, like a wagon wheel. Run me, mama, any way you feel. Hey, mama, rock me.
Know what? No, what? I just switched to Geico and got more.
More?
Got a company I can trust.
That's a heck of a lot more.
Over 75 years of great savings and service.
You can't argue with more.
Why would you?
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
What is love? 2 hearts, 1 soul, a kiss, a hug, a laugh. It's passion. It's freedom. It's mystery. It's the journey and the destination. It's vows made and promises kept. It's a feeling, a need, no rules. All included, all unlimited. Feed your hunger, quench your thirst, live your dreams. Fulfilled, indulged, reborn. What is love? Love is all you need. Call 1-800-SANDALS.
Hello. Let's go for a ride on a Peloton. Let's go grab a couple thousand friends and chase each other up a hill. Let's go make a personal best, then beat it with your personal better than best. Let's go bring the world's best instructors right to you. Better yet, let's go bring the entire New York studio live. Let's go anytime, anywhere, with anyone who's willing. And let's go do it all right here. Ready to go? Peloton.
Summer can be full of joy and surprises.
Everyone happy?
Yes! Do something!
But WeatherTech's got you covered with laser-measured floor liners, seat protectors, cargo liners, and a full line of automotive accessories. Order yours today at WeatherTech.com, the ultimate protection for your vehicle.
Who would have thought? Who would have guessed? An energy company helping cars emit less. Making cars lighter. It's a good place to start. Advanced oils. For
for those hard-working parts. Fuels that go further, so drivers pump less. Improving efficiency is what we do best. Energy lives here.
It's simple. People count on you, and you count on your truck. So we built you the most capable line of Ram trucks yet. The all-new Ram 1500 delivers best-in-class V8 towing. The Ram 2500 has best-in-class gas towing. And the Ram 3500 gives you best-in-class fifth-wheel towing. That's why more people are switching to Ram than ever before.
Now get an average $8,984 in total values on the 2018 Ram 2500 Limited Crew Cab with a Cummins diesel engine.
Hi, I'm Mike Ditkin. And I'm Johnny Bench. And we're no strangers to big-time pain. That's why we need big-time pain relief. So Johnny and I use Blue Emu's pain relief products. Blue Emu pain relief products' non-greasy, deep-penetrating formula gets down deep into those muscles and joints and does its magic. It's relief that won't leave you smelling like you need a bath. I need a bath? You know. I don't think so. It's cold, is what it is. Blue Emu. It works fast and you won't stink.
All right, it's time for one more thing, Jesse.
So, you know, I'm a big Eagles fan, and Brian and Jillian, some friends of mine, sent me an actual Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl helmet here. You guys remember the score? Eagles 41, Patriots 33.
Oh my God.
There we go. Get it locked in.
I hope you can't get out of it.
These are the friends from Nashville?
These are the friends from Nashville right here. Here we go. I'm ready to roll. Run right through a wall right now.
Yes.
Okay, well.
A wall of something. Dana.
A wall of something. Okay, I love this story. A Birmingham college student walked 20 miles to his first day of work, so his boss gave him a car. Walter Carr's own car broke down the night before he was supposed to start his new job, but that did not stop him from showing up after over 4 hours of walking, starting at 2 a.m. And with some help from local police, he made it to work, and the company's CEO heard about this story, personally thanked him, and gifting Walter his own barely driven Ford Escape. Walter wants to go to the Marines, so I feel like he's going to make it. Take a listen to him.
I love helping people, so this car is making much easier to do what I need to do to help and expand myself out more.
Good luck to you, Walter Carr.
He injured himself?
I injured myself putting on the helmet. Put my finger on the strap, I think.
My goodness.
Like a real football player.
I think
guys sucked that blood right out.
A casino files suit against the victims of last year's shooting at a concert. Yes, you heard that correctly. Suing about 1,000 victims. The owners say they have no liability for the massacre. A lawyer representing several victims say the hotel's unusual action is a preemptive strike to get the cases heard in federal court instead of state court, and to avoid many years of individual lawsuits against MGM. And this is a live look at Honolulu from KHON, our affiliate out there. One of the big stories there tonight, 23 people Monday were hurt when an explosion sent molten rock barreling through the roof of a tour boat. The Coast Guard prohibits boats from getting closer than 984 feet from where Kilauea volcano's lava oozes into the sea. The agency had been allowing experienced boat operators to go a little bit closer, 160 feet, but it has stopped those exceptions. That's tonight's live look. Outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom, the nation's largest senior living referral service. For the past 5 years, I've spoken with hundreds of families and visited senior care communities around the country. And I've got to tell you, today's senior living communities are better than ever. These days, there are amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And nobody understands your options like the advisors at A Place for Mom. These are local expert advisors that will partner with you to find the perfect place and determine the right level of care, whether that's just a helping hand or full-time memory care. Best of all, it's a free service. There is never any cost to you. Senior living has never been better, and there's never been an easier way to get great advice. Call today. A Place for Mom. You know your family. We know senior living. Together, we'll make the right choice.
Running a business means I can't waste time, especially when I'm hiring. I used to pore over resumes, but now I post my jobs on Indeed. Their screener questions help me get to my shortlist, people with the qualifications I need, like 5 years experience. All saving me time that I get to put back into running my business. Hiring's better when you've got your shortlist. Learn how screener questions can save you time when you post your job on Indeed.
You always pay your insurance on time. Tap one little bumper and up go your rates. What good is having insurance if you get punished for using it? Newsflash, nobody's perfect.
For drivers with accident forgiveness, Liberty Mutual won't raise your rates due to your first accident. Switch and you could save $782 on home and auto insurance. Call 1-888-686-3155 for a free quote today. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Most shirts are pre-made, resized, and off the shelf. While at Proper Cloth, we don't do off the shelf. We do custom. Shirts that are made to fit you perfectly. And it all starts online with our Perfect Fit questionnaire. In about 3 minutes, we have everything we need to create a custom shirt for you. That's how technology is changing fashion. So, you do you. Be tall. Be not tall. Have long arms. Eat ice cream. Work out like you mean it. And we'll make shirts for you. Custom shirts. Guaranteed to fit. Or we'll remake it. Starting at just $80. Go to propercloth.com now. Use promo code PROPERFIT and get $20 off your first custom shirt. This is Proper Cloth.
In America's election headquarters tonight, GOP voters in one Alabama district are deciding their nominee for a key congressional seat. It's a rematch of sorts between an incumbent Republican and a former Democrat. Correspondent Jonathan Sari explains from Prattville, Alabama.
Republican voters in Alabama's conservative 2nd Congressional District have a choice to make. Elect Bobby Bright, their former Democratic congressman, now running as a Trump-supporting Republican.
It's time now for us, for everybody, to show up and vote.
Or re-elect 4-term incumbent Congresswoman Martha Roby, who's been tying her opponent to national leaders of his old party.
And very clearly, the people of Alabama's 2nd Congressional District have rejected the Obama-Pelosi agenda, and we feel confident that they will this time.
As he cast his ballot in Millbrook, Bright appeared optimistic about his chances of reclaiming the U.S. House seat he lost to Roby back in 2010.
Sending some of these incumbents home and send a strong message that if you don't represent the people, they have a day, and that day is election day.
In a solidly Republican district, Roby has spent the last 2 years having to defend her decision to temporarily speak out against then-candidate Donald Trump after the Access Hollywood tape surfaced in which he talked about groping women. Since then, Roby has been a loyal supporter of President Trump, who returned the favor with his endorsement.
Thank you for your support.
As the incumbent, Roby has enjoyed heavy campaign funding from Washington, which she hopes will counteract any of the damage done by once criticizing candidate Trump.
If she does win, it won't be by a landslide. It'll be because Trump endorsed her and got her out of the doghouse, and the National Chamber of Commerce and every political PAC in Washington loaded her up with money.
The winner of the GOP primary will face Democrat Tabitha Eisner in November. Now, Alabama's 2nd Congressional District is heavily Republican, so the real contest is this GOP runoff that's unfolding right here, right now. Brett?
Jonathan Sari live in Alabama. Thank you very much. Alabama is one state where some see action by legislators paving the way potentially for the eventual reversal of federal abortion law. All of that may hinge, of course, on the confirmation of President Trump's pick to fill the vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court. Correspondent Doug McKelway tonight on where Brett Kavanaugh's nomination stands right now. Are you going to make it to the All-Star game? I'll be there.
As Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh resumed his get-acquainted sessions with senators, even casual talk about baseball was a loaded topic after the Washington Post found he incurred credit card debt to buy Washington Nats tickets for friends. The same friends repaid the debt as they attended the games. A more charged issue is, will a more right-leaning court overturn Roe v. Wade? Already some states are laying the groundwork. West Virginia has a ballot measure that, if agreed to, would remove protections for abortion rights and funding. Another ballot measure would amend Alabama's constitution to give rights to a fetus. Indiana will soon decide whether to challenge a court decision that ruled the state cannot ban abortion of a Down syndrome child. Ohio has a similar ban, which is also being challenged. Separate Court of Appeals are now considering whether Texas, Arkansas, and Alabama can prohibit second trimester abortions. The ACLU has already challenged a similar Kentucky ban. It's cases like these that have pro-choice advocates more worried than at any time since the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision.
The backpedaling that's happening now from people who have long been critics of Roe v. Wade is partially because they know what we know, which is most American people actually, regardless of how they feel personally about abortion, believe that legal access is core to our country's principles.
Yet most analysts doubt that overturning Roe v. Wade would result in an outright ban of abortion.
I think it's pretty clear different states would have different options as it relates to abortion. So to me, this narrative that somehow abortion is going away in this country forever is just not accurate.
Paxton is right. There is no federal statute that makes an abortion illegal. So overturning Roe v. Wade would simply hand the decision back to individual states. Brett?
Doug, thank you. Up next, we'll take a look at the Russian woman now charged with trying to infiltrate American political groups. First, beyond our borders tonight, families are burying the dead following a bloody weekend in Nicaragua as police and paramilitary groups attacked roadblocks set up by anti-government demonstrators demanding President Daniel Ortega's exit from office. Monday, the family and friends of a 20-year-old university student carried his casket to a Managua cemetery. The U.S. State Department and the United Nations are condemning the continued violence there. Iran says there are grounds for nuclear cooperation with the U.S. if Washington stops its hostile policy toward Tehran. A spokesman for Iran's nuclear agency says cooperation is possible, but that it's unlikely U.S. actions will change. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his military is prepared for any scenario. Netanyahu made those comments as he visited an area bordering the Gaza Strip. Today, Israel placed new restrictions on its only cargo crossing with the Strip. It's a response to continued Hamas hostilities there, even after a ceasefire ending 24 hours of intense fighting over the weekend. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.
If you have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, little things can be a big deal. That's why there's Otezla. Otezla is not an injection or a cream. It's a pill that treats psoriasis differently. With Otezla, 75% clear skin is achievable after just 4 months, with reduced redness, thickness, and scaliness of plaques. And the Otezla prescription has no...
Crab Fest is back at Red Lobster. Discover our large of crab and crab dishes all year, like new Crab Fest Combo. Your one chance to have new jumbo snow crab with tender Dungeness crab. Or try Crab Lover's Dream, sweet, juicy king crab and jumbo crab cozied up with crab linguine Alfredo. Even our shrimp is crab topped, so hurry in and get your butter Dunkin' game on, because Crab Fest will be gone in a snap. And now bring home the seafood you crave with Red Lobster to go. Call or order online today.
Ways to lose stubborn belly fat. The chili pepper sweat out. Not cool. Freezing away fat cells with Cool Sculpting? Now that's cool. Cool Sculpting safely freezes and removes fat cells with little or no downtime and no surgery. Results and patient experience may vary. Some common side effects include temporary numbness, discomfort, and swelling. Ask your doctor if Cool Sculpting is right for you and visit CoolSculpting.com today for your chance to win a free treatment.
Do you have bruised skin? You need Dermen Moisturizing Bruise Formula for mature skin. Dermen uses proven ingredients that help improve the appearance of bruises. Help your bruised skin. Get Dermen now at Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, and Rite Aid.
Hi, this is Jonathan. I just had my birthday. I'm not afraid to get older. I'm a kid at heart. I'm looking for a woman who's trusting, funny, and loving.
Looking for a real relationship?
I'm on Match to find a real connection with someone.
Check out Match right now for free.
If you're turning 65, you may be learning about Medicare and supplemental insurance. Medicare is great, but it doesn't cover everything. Only about 80% of your Part B Medicare costs. A Medicare supplement insurance plan may help cover some of the rest. Learn how an AARP Medicare supplement insurance plan, insured by United Healthcare Insurance Company, might be the right choice for you. A free decision guide is a great place to start. Call today to request yours. So, what makes an AARP Medicare supplement plan unique? These are the only Medicare supplement plans endorsed by AARP because they meet AARP's high standards of quality and service. You're also getting features that any Medicare supplement plan provides. You may choose any doctor that accepts Medicare patients. You can even visit a specialist. With this type of plan, there are no networks or referrals needed. Also, a Medicare supplement plan goes with you when you travel anywhere in the U.S. Call today for a free guide.
Billions of mouths, billions of problems. Sore gums, bleeding gums, painful flossing? There's a TheraBreath for you. TheraBreath Healthy Gums Oral Rinse fights gingivitis and plaque and prevents gum disease for 24 hours. So you can breathe easy. There's TheraBreath, a Walmart.
You shouldn't be rushed into booking a hotel. With Expedia's add-on advantage, booking a flight unlocks discounts on select hotels until the day you leave for your trip. Add-on advantage, only when you book with Expedia.
I was born during the winter of '77. I first met James in 5th grade. We got married after college and had twin boys. But then, one night, the truck didn't stop. But thanks to our Forester, neither did our story. That's why we'll always drive a Subaru.
That were even stronger than were required by congressional mandate. So if you care about actual actions, I think there's a lot to be happy about in terms of a tough posture toward Russia. People are obsessed about words, and they should maybe focus on the actions as well.
Okay, here is Congressman Tom Cole and how his reaction to all this.
It was the last president, not this president, who told Russian leaders that he would be more flexible after an election. It was the last president, not this president, that said Russia was not a geopolitical threat and chastised Mitt Romney when he raised it in the campaign. And it was the last president, not this president, that drew a red line and then refused to enforce it.
Matthew, I guess the most that we heard today on Capitol Hill was that the president should have made those comments in front of Vladimir Putin to tell him, knock it off, or you can't do it again, or what we talked about privately, I'm not going to go over this again here, but we have an understanding that this is over behind us.
We don't know what was said in the private meeting, and I think if you look back on President Trump's history of diplomacy, I think he's much more willing to be harsher in the private settings, at least with these authoritarian leaders, than he is in the public ones. What did people want? I think people wanted the president not to necessarily equate the opinions of his own director of national intelligence, Dan Coats, with those of Vladimir Putin. That was, I think, the major mistake.
Kind of the moral equivalence.
Exactly. That sense of moral equivalence, I think, only leads President Putin to think that he has more of a free hand when it comes to intruding and meddling in our elections in the cyberspace. I think President Trump has been very effective in reestablishing deterrence in a lot of security areas vis-a-vis a lot of our enemies or competitors, but it's where it comes to cyber intrusions and election meddling where I think he may have let a blind spot with his remarks yesterday.
A couple of weeks ago that occasionally I would do this to hear from the late, great Dr. Charles Krauthammer on different issues. Here's one of them.
A lot of countries try to influence American elections. We try to influence elections among our democracies, Israel being a prime example.
But Russia's a special case because it's an adversary working against us. Putin is not a friend of the United States. And being a good, well-trained KGB agent, he lies with a smile. And nothing like that happens without the state in Russia. He knows it, we know it, but he's a very good liar. And Trump, when he is in office, he's going to have to send a clear message to his friend Vladimir, that this can't be done without consequences.
So whether the clear message is sent, as Molly says, with policy and actions, or whether it needs to be said rhetorically in front of him, is the question that some Trump supporters are debating.
You know, there's another question I think that people would like to hear from President Trump, and that's a more full-throated embrace of our Democratic friends, our allies, than an adversary. And I think one of the things that made this press conference so distressing to some people is that it came on the heels of these the difficult NATO summit and the castigation of Angela Merkel and the disparagement of Theresa May. I think it left the impression that President Trump was dissing our allies with whom we share democratic and in favor of embracing someone who does not have a democracy.
I will say the president sometimes, and he was as a candidate, but he does sometimes live in the moment now. And, you know, like that was then, this is now, this is what I think I said, and this is what we should use going forward.
Well, and it's particularly challenging for him because he's been sort of all over the place. He will concede that Russians meddled in the election, and then when he feels that other people are conflating that meddling with collusion, treasonous collusion, then he'll dismiss the whole enchilada, and he needs to be understanding that just because other people play that game doesn't mean that he gets to, and he needs to be more clear. He did say today in that little statement that they are working very hard to keep meddling from happening in 2018, and that is a great thing. It would have been good to say that at the previous moment.
Well, we've got a big interview tonight. 8 o'clock, Tucker Carlson sits down with the president and talks about a host of issues. Told us pretty good, and we should tune in. So we should do that. Next up, reaction to the media coverage of all of this, and maybe what comes next.
It's the Ford Summer Sales Event, and now is the best time to buy. And check out the all-new EcoSport. Protect those who matter most. And make the summer go right with Ford, America's best-selling brand. Ford Summer Sales Event. Get 0% financing for 60 months on a huge selection of SUVs. And for the first time ever, get 0% financing for 60 months plus $1,000 Ford bonus cash on the 2018 EcoSport.
Looking for vacation rentals? Search Home to Go Florida from $49. Home to Go Texas from $45. Home to Go New York from $59. Home to Go, the world's largest vacation rental search engine.
Home to Go.
This is a story of packages, and it's also a story about people. And while we make more e-commerce deliveries to homes than anyone else in the country, we never forget that your business is our business. The United States Postal Service. Priority, you.
Tonight, it's so bad, and we have to do something about it. Tucker gets new must-see insight from the president, only on Fox News Channel.
I'm young. I'm not supposed to have high blood pressure.
If you just learned you have high blood pressure, or you're already treating it with medication, you can benefit from adding the Zona Plus to your treatment plan.
Medication is not the answer all the time for treatment of blood pressure.
The Zona Plus therapy is safe and easy to do, at home or on the go. Each daily treatment takes only 12 minutes. Do it while you're watching TV, during breakfast, relaxing, even before a workout.
I started using the Zona, and within the first 2 weeks, I was noticing a big difference. It was very exciting.
I've been using it now for about a year and a half, and I absolutely love it.
The Zona Plus is a drug-free, software-controlled, handheld device that's clinically proven to help lower blood pressure. If you are not a fan of prescriptions, the idea of using a non-invasive medical device seems like a great alternative. The science behind the Zona Plus is based on an isometric technology, which was initially developed by a respected cardiopulmonary physiologist. The same technology evolved into the patented Zona Plus therapy.
Every once in a while, I remind him, "Are you doing your Zona?" And he'll say, "Yep."
Every day. Neither of us take any medication for blood pressure anymore. It's all done.
In studies, 90% of people lowered their blood pressure 10 to 15 points in as few as 4 to 8 weeks.
I'm the type of person that needs to be in control of my life. And the Zona Plus gives me that opportunity to be in control of my blood pressure. And that is such an empowering feeling.
And with the company's fantastic 90-day money-back guarantee, backed by a full refund of the purchase price, there's no risk.